A secret admirer for the mail-order bride. Westbound Hearts Book 2. By Blythe Carver. Prologue. The three West sisters, Emma, Rose, and Amelia, sat in the Frontage Road restaurant with their brother's wife, Anna. They were trying to cheer up their sister-in-law, who was pregnant by 7 months and feeling quite uncomfortable. Amelia was distracted, though. Her sisters were chatting excitedly about an upcoming party they were having at their estate. Amelia's eyes were focused through the window to the street outside, where Tom McAllister was unloading a wagon full of lumber into a shop, where they would be cut to sizes asked for by customers. Amelia remembered Tom from the schoolhouse when they were young. He was always helpful and kind. He never teased her like some of the other boys. She and her sisters weren't teased often anyway, as their brother Daniel, who was the oldest in the family, saw to that. It always amazed Amelia that Tom wasn't married. She'd been feeling the urge to start her family soon, as her 26th birthday was coming up and she was on her way to spinsterhood. But Tom was the only man she'd ever been attracted to. And he was in love with another woman from the next town over, Martha Smith. "Isn't that right, Amelia?" she heard. She refocused her attention on her sisters, giving each of them a blank look. Emma giggled, putting one hand over her mouth. "I don't think she was paying attention," she said. "Where were you at, Amelia?" "Nowhere," Amelia replied, trying not to feel irritated. She didn't like to talk to her younger sisters about Tom. The man was courting Ms. Smith and had been for almost 5 years. No one knew when they would get married. Amelia didn't know why it hadn't already happened. But it stopped her from expressing her feelings to anyone. She didn't want to look like the kind of woman that pined after a taken man. "I was just watching the people outside." "Oh." Emma twisted her head to look out the window to her right. "What's so fascinating out there?" "Stop teasing Amelia, Em," Anna said, sitting back in the chair and resting one hand on her swollen stomach. "It's okay for her to get lost in thought, isn't it?" Anna's voice came out irritated, but Emma just gave her a sympathetic look. "I'm sorry, Anna." "You're right, of course." She turned back to Amelia, smiling. "I'm sorry." Amelia shook her head. "It's okay. What was it you were talking about?" The other women looked at each other. When no one spoke, they all laughed softly. "What were we talking about?" Emma asked. "Surely it was the party. That's all we've been talking about for weeks. I'm so excited about it. I'm really surprised Daniel agreed to it. But so glad he did." Amelia raised her eyebrows. "Why did you think he wouldn't?" Emma shrugged. "I don't know. He hasn't been very social lately, I don't think." She turned her hazel eyes to Anna. "Is there anything wrong with him that you know of? Is he getting enough sleep? Eating right? I'll be honest, I haven't noticed anything different, other than he's been pouring himself into the business of running the estate and the business. He hasn't done anything fun for months." "He's anxious," Anna confirmed. "Tosses and turns at night. I think it's because he's nervous about becoming a father. But it isn't like he has to worry about providing for us. The business is doing well, better than ever, really. That's a result of him working more than usual. I think that will stop once the baby is born." Amelia nodded. "I think so too. I'll just bet he plans to take some time off of working, so he can spend it with you and the baby." "That sounds like Daniel to me," Rose said, crossing her arms and leaning forward on the table. "3 sisters, and he still has no experience with babies or children. He must be real nervous." "I'm sure it causes him a lot of worry," Anna said. "He has married friends with children, though. He'll talk to those men if he wants to." Amelia turned her eyes outside once again. She would give anything to have the courage to go out and talk to him. Tom was nearly done with the wagon, but there was another directly behind him. When he was done with the wagon he was unloading, the second driver would take the first wagon back to the lumber mill up on Sugar Hill Mountain. Her stomach churned at the thought of just getting up and going out there. Just walking across the road. Just saying hi. What was so bad about that? But she wouldn't. She'd give away her feelings in the first 15 minutes of talking to him. At the festivals and parties and dances, he never asked her. He was always with Martha. A feeling of hopelessness washed over Amelia, and she moved her eyes away from him. It was a useless endeavor, a pipe dream that would never happen. He was courting another, and she would have to accept that. She didn't think she'd be able to, though, until he was a married man. Martha was a fine-looking woman from Ricketts Hollow, which was 25 miles from the border of Boone's Gulch. She was 26, like Amelia and Tom. She had attended one school grade in the schoolhouse of Boone's Gulch, after a fire consumed the one in her town. She reportedly came from a good family, and both sets of parents were on board with the marriage plans. So why weren't they married? What was holding them back? These were questions Amelia had been wondering for years. How long would it be until she made a decision about her own life and stopped holding on to impossible dreams? "Let's go to the parlor," Emma said excitedly. "That will cheer you up, Anna. Will make you look so pretty." "Well, Jenny will anyway." To Amelia's surprise, and probably the surprise of her sisters too, Anna seemed to brighten up a little. Amelia nodded and gave them a smile. "Okay. That sounds lovely." Chapter 1. Amelia managed to keep her eyes away from Tom as the ladies left the restaurant and went down the wooden walkway to the next block. "Hello." Amelia reacted when Emma called out the greeting and waved her hand frantically. Her sister was waving in the direction of the lumber shop. Her heart slammed in her chest, and she turned her head to see Emma was, in fact, waving at Tom, who was standing in the wagon looking at them. A tingle ran over Amelia's skin. She smiled at him. He smiled back. He pulled off one of his work gloves and took a handkerchief from his back pocket. He wiped his sweaty forehead, pushing back his dark brown hair. Amelia couldn't help thinking how handsome he was. She refrained from sighing. "Working hard?" Emma called out. Tom's grin widened as he pushed the handkerchief back in his pocket and pulled on the glove. "Never," he called back. "If I can help it." They all laughed, Amelia included. Her sisters continued on, and she forced herself to go with them. She would have stayed in that spot and watched Tom work for the next few hours if he wanted her to. She'd take him cold drinks and make sure he had a good lunch. Wife things. A streak of anxiety made her heart feel squeezed. She swallowed hard and followed her sisters into the beauty parlor. "Howdy," the assistant to the owner of the beauty parlor, Jenny, greeted them with a boisterous loud tone as soon as they entered. There were 3 other women in the lobby area, and one in the chair, where the owner, Gretchen, was working on her, massaging some kind of lotion into the woman's skin. "This is the best we have, Myrtle," Gretchen was saying. "You know I wouldn't do you wrong." "You better not," Myrtle said, her eyes closed and her head leaned back slightly in the chair. Her tone didn't match the words she was saying. "You know what I do to people who put the wrong lotion on my face, don't you?" Gretchen stepped away from the older woman, holding both hands in the air with her elbows at her sides. She was giving Myrtle a curious, amused look. "No, I don't think so." "I tell them to not use the same lotion the next time, of course," Myrtle said, cracking a grin that made her face look 10 years younger. She opened her eyes to see the reaction of her audience. The sisters and the other women in the parlor all laughed appreciatively. When Myrtle rested her head back against the chair and closed her eyes, she had a tremendously satisfied look on her face. Jenny left the desk, taking a ledger with her to where the sisters were standing. "Which one of you is looking to have something done today?" she asked, moving her eyes between them. "Or do you want me to make time for you all?" "Today is Anna's day, Jenny," Emma said, excitement in her voice. "She's feeling uncomfortable with herself." "Fat," Anna interrupted. "I look tired and fat all the time. I don't know how Daniel can stand it." Jenny gasped and put one hand on Anna's arm. "Don't you dare talk like that. You are a beautiful woman. I'm going to make you realize that today. Come on, come sit down and let's get started giving you a new hairdo to show off. Anna went willingly to the chair, and Amelia stayed behind, sitting in the lobby with the others while both Emma and Rose went to the chair to talk about what Jenny should do to Anna. Amelia was a bit amused that Anna took it as well as she did. She must have been decidedly depressed to desire that kind of attention. She wasn't normally a woman who fussed over her looks. After watching her sisters babble on for a few minutes, Amelia couldn't help moving her eyes through the window and down the street to where Tom was just starting on the second wagon. He was likely to be there for another 2 hours, getting the wood out and taking it inside. He wasn't working quickly, and appeared to be taking his time. He could if he wanted to. He was a trusted lumberjack with a solid reputation as an honest man. It was just another thing Amelia admired about him. He was further away from her now that they were in the beauty parlor. She couldn't see the expression on his face when he talked to passers-by, or Alex, the man who worked in the store. But she could see when those people smiled wide, and sometimes laughed at whatever Tom was saying. She wished she was closer. Like right next to him. Smiling and laughing like everyone else he encountered. Look at you, daydreaming. Amelia turned her eyes to the woman who had spoken, an elderly member of the town, Helen McMurphy. The woman was 80 years old at least, and still had strawberry blonde hair. Amelia would never have believed it if she didn't know it as a fact. I wasn't I? Amelia replied, chuckling. You fancy that young man out there? Amelia was washed over with humiliation. She felt her cheeks burn hot and she slumped her shoulders in shame. Helen's face immediately changed and she leaned forward, holding out one hand. Oh, it looks like I've upset you. No need, my dear. He is a good-looking young man. She smiled wide, making Amelia feel better. She straightened her spine and grinned back. Yes, he is. It would take a blind woman not to see that, Helen said with a quiet laugh. He is popular for more than that, though. He's a charming gentleman as well. Amelia nodded. I know. I went to school with him. Sometimes I wonder why he hasn't already gotten married, though. Isn't he engaged to Martha Smith from over in Ricketts Hollow? Helen raised her eyebrows. That's what everyone believes. Amelia felt a tingle on her skin. She furrowed her brows, giving the old woman a contemplative look. You don't? It looked like Helen didn't want to answer or explain herself. Amelia was about to tell her to never mind, when Helen said something that made Amelia want to hear more. I find that hearts can be fickle when they are mismatched. Amelia couldn't deny the flicker of hope she felt in her heart. You think they are mismatched? Helen sighed, leaning back, turning her eyes to look through the window and down the street. It's not my place to say, child. It is my opinion, they are not a compatible couple. There's something odd about their behavior when you see them together. Rather stiff, if you ask me. I never really noticed that, Amelia admitted. I guess I don't want to know. He's been courting her for some years, and I expect a wedding announcement should be soon forthcoming. I suppose we will see about that, Helen said with a smile. Until then, there's nothing wrong with admiring the man, is there? If I was 60 years younger. She let the sentence trail off, and Amelia joined her in soft laughter. You'll be able to see for yourself shortly, you know, Helen continued. Amelia raised her eyebrows, her joviality subsiding. Whatever do you mean? She's coming to town today. Martha is, Helen explained. Why, she should be here any minute. Amelia denied the sick feeling that came to her stomach. Her eyes went back out to Tom, who gave no indication he was waiting for Martha. He was concentrated on his work. Not once did his eyes look up and around him to see if his betrothed had arrived. Amelia didn't know what to think. If you are thinking it's about time you be married, Helen continued, drawing her attention back to the old woman, you should consider finding a man the same way Anna did. She is very much in love with your brother, isn't she? And he is with her as well? I'm right?" Amelia nodded. "You're right. But there's never a guarantee with that. I don't know if I can fall in love with a stranger." She knew it would be even more impossible when her heart was consumed with love for Tom McAllister. It would take quite a man to beat him for her heart. Still, maybe Helen was right. Maybe that would be her only option. Waiting for Tom was useless. Chapter 2. While Amelia was thinking about the mail-order bride tactic Anna had used to find Daniel and he to find her, the door opened, and in walked the very woman they had been talking about. Amelia wondered if Martha's ears were burning moments before. Martha looked around smiling, pulling off her gloves as she did so. "Hello, ladies," she said with a voice as smooth as satin. "How are we all feeling today?" "Hello, Martha, how good to see you. You look wonderful." The other ladies in the lobby all rose from their seats and went to give Martha cheek kisses. Martha turned her eyes to Amelia just as Emma and Rose were coming over from the chair Anna was now leaning back in. "Melly," Martha said. Amelia was sure she detected a note of resentment in the woman's voice. But what would she have to be resentful about? Martha had the handsomest man in town, the most charming, the friendliest by far. Martha was also the only one in the entirety of Boone's Gulch, and those who knew Amelia in Ricketts Hollow that called her Melly. She detested the sound of it, and had told Martha so on several occasions. It didn't stop the woman from saying it though, which told Amelia she was doing it on purpose and not by accident, as she liked to claim. "Martha," she responded in a tone much the same as Martha's. "Hello, Martha darling," Emma said, reaching the visitor and giving her double cheek kisses. "You are looking so beautiful. There's no need for you to even be in this place, is there?" "I look absolutely hideous," Martha exclaimed, rolling her eyes and patting the back of her head, which was covered with a light blue bonnet. "I simply must have something done with this hair. I don't think men take kindly to a mop head, do you?" Amelia caught the reference to men. Why was Martha worried about what other men thought of her looks? Was she trying to attract another man? Perhaps she already had another man. Again, Amelia had to shake her head. She was being distracted by her thoughts and thinking nonsense just to ease her desire for a man that was taken. Thinking Amelia was agreeing with her, Martha dramatically pulled off her bonnet and shook out her long straight blonde hair. "I just have to have something done with this." Amelia shoved away the feeling of jealousy. Martha was about as shallow as they came, and Amelia wasn't going to let it bother her for long. What could she do about it? Nothing. She stepped back so Martha could pass her. "My dear Gretchen," she said loudly, crossing to the back where the salon chairs were. "I just know you can do something with this." Amelia tried not to sneer, thinking there wasn't a smidgen of the frizz needed in Martha's stick-straight hair that could qualify it as a mop head. She was just vying for attention and getting it from her brainwashed friends and sisters. The only one who looked wisely at what was going on was Helen. For a moment, she wondered what Helen was thinking about what was happening. She glanced over and saw a bemused look on the older woman's face. Helen's her bright blue eyes, so full of age and wisdom, flicked to meet Amelia's. Amelia would have sworn Helen was thinking, "See what I mean?" Martha buzzed about like a honeybee, until Jenny got her in one of the other two chairs and settled her down for a wash and style. Amelia listened to the woman's chatter, wishing they hadn't chosen that day to go to the beauty parlor. She was surprised to hear Helen speak up. "So tell us, Martha, how is that man of yours?" The moment of hesitation before Martha laughed caught Amelia's attention. It was almost as if she was trying to remember who her man was. "Tom? Oh, he's fine and dandy. He's outside, you know," Helen continued. "Why don't you go see him?" Martha moved her eyes to the front window, but Amelia knew there was no way she could see Tom from her chair in the back of the shop. "Oh yes, I plan to go see him," she said smoothly. "But first I must come and see my friends, and let them make me beautiful for him." I've been under the weather lately, I think. A little blue. I know this will make me feel much better. That's precisely why we brought Anna here, Emma said in a volume a little higher than Amelia thought was necessary. She couldn't fathom why Emma would seek approval from a woman who didn't even live in Boone's Gulch. It sounded to Amelia like her sister was trying to impress Martha. She has a very good reason for feeling uncomfortable in her skin right now. Martha flashed a grin at Anna, who had to lift her head to look at the woman but smiled back nonetheless. Don't you even worry about it, Anna dear, Martha continued. You'll be back to feeling like your old self in, what about 8 weeks? Soft laughter floated around the room. Yes, that's right, Anna replied in an amiable voice. According to the doctor, anyway. Well, I am very excited for you. Amelia had to admit to herself that Martha sounded genuine. Her next words, though, sent Amelia back to her suspicious thoughts. I can't imagine what it must be like to have children. I don't know if I could be responsible for another human being, running around after them, making sure they are clothed and fed. Amelia had to stop herself from jumping in with a bunch of questions. Was that what Tom wanted too? No children? Surely he wanted to have offspring, to carry on the McAllister name at least. He was an only child. Who else would do it but him? She would have asked those questions if she hadn't glanced at Helen and seen a look of warning. The old woman crooked her finger at Amelia, who casually stood up and went to sit right next to the older woman. You mustn't start any trouble, my dear, the old woman whispered, patting Amelia's hand. I'm afraid that would only cause distress for you. I'm ashamed of how I feel, Amelia kept her voice as low as Helen's. He is practically married already. They've been courting for years. Helen nodded. I understand what you're saying. You must guard yourself, Amelia, guard your heart. Nothing good can come of this. Talk to Anna, find a way to take back your heart. Chances aren't good that he will ever be free to associate with you the way you want him to. Maybe a man from another town will show him what he's missing by coming here and sweeping you off your feet. Amelia put one hand over her mouth to cover the smile. Isn't it usually the woman who goes to the man? A bewildered, innocent look came to Helen's face, making Amelia snort with laughter. I don't know anything about it. I don't like to gossip. Good try, Helen. But this topic of discussion isn't gossip. It was an honest question. Change the tradition, Helen responded, winking at Amelia. You can be the first woman to make the man come to her. If you choose that route, you know full well Daniel will want to be involved. He's been there for you and your sisters all this time. He's going to be the same way with any man you show interest in, or who shows interest in you. I don't know if I want to entrust him with the idea, though. Helen nodded. Get Anna for assistance. And maybe you can ask her how she thinks Daniel will take it. She knows him better than anyone now. Amelia turned her head and looked at Anna, who was chatting with Rose while Jenny circled behind her, gazing at Anna's hair like it was an easel she was about to paint on. I'll do that, Helen. You are wise. I think you are right. It's time I start concentrating on my future. I've been thinking that for a while, but I always end up putting him in that future. It's time you stop torturing yourself that way, Helen said softly, reaching over to pat Amelia's hand again. Time for you to get what you want and what you deserve. You never know, maybe you'll find a man exactly like Tom. 2 of them in one town? Amelia laughed. All the ladies would faint at once. Both the women laughed, and Amelia felt a bit better now that she had a tentative plan.
Chapter 3. Tom saw Martha when she went in the beauty parlor. That was usually her first stop when she came to town. This was a surprise visit, though, and he felt a bit of resentment that he hadn't been warned she was coming. He'd been taking his time until he saw her. Then he pushed himself to try to finish up before Martha came out of the parlor. For some reason, the moment he saw her, he had to fight the urge to run, to flee, to hide. Was it just cold feet? Pre-wedding jitters? Tom was sure it was more than that. His father and Martha's father were best friends. They'd arranged the marriage when Tom and Martha were young. The entire year Martha was at their schoolhouse, she bragged that she would marry him someday. He was disappointed that he still had several more layers of wood to go when Martha came out of the parlor and headed toward him. Knowing there was no way around it, he hopped down from the back of the wagon and turned to face her, stripping off his gloves and laying them over the side wall of the wagon. "Tom, darling," Martha called out, throwing her arms out wide as if she was going to hug him tight. She wasn't about to do that though, Tom knew. He'd been working all day and was dirty, tired and sweaty. She wasn't going to touch him with a 10-foot pole. "Good afternoon, Martha. Aren't you looking ravishing today? Jenny did good work." He enjoyed the momentary irritation that slid across Martha's face when he gave Jenny the credit for making Martha look nice. "Oh, thank you, Tom. It was really Gretchen, but yes, I am very satisfied with the work she did." Martha's eyes drifted off as she patted the back of her head. A moment later she looked up, meeting his gaze. "Do you have a moment? We can go somewhere and talk. I have a message for your father from mine." "Yes, of course." Tom gave her a big smile and stepped back, holding one arm out to the lumber shop. "We can use Alex's office, I'm sure." "Is there a washroom in the place?" Martha asked, looking at the lumber shop like it was dangerous foreign lands. Tom was momentarily confused. Surely Martha didn't need to wash up after coming from the beauty parlor. "I think he has a pitcher and basin for washing his hands. Handling wood can be dirty work sometimes." The look Martha gave him made his skin crawl. "Precisely why you need a washroom." Her eyes were as sharp as her tone. Tom reined in his temper and just smiled wide. "Let's go on in and talk. I'm sure I can wash my hands in there." "A complete bath would be better." He barely heard her say the words as her back was turned to him, and she was keeping a fake smile on her face to disguise what she was feeling to anyone who might be looking. He knew her intent. She wanted everyone in town to think they were happy, that they wanted to be together, wanted to get married. Tom hated the deception. He wouldn't have gone through with it if his father didn't mean so much to him. Besides, Martha was a beautiful woman on the outside and would produce beautiful children too. It was the inside of the woman Tom found to be not so attractive. At one point, when they were teenagers, they were friends and thought the idea was a good one. When they both turned 21, their fathers brought the arrangement to their attention, and though things were beginning to cool off, they both agreed. It was now several years later, and they were sick of each other. Tom couldn't imagine what it would be like to be married to a shallow woman with no prospects other than getting her face and hair tended to, and with little compassion for anyone beyond the scope of her mirror. "Mind if we use your office, Alex?" Martha asked in a saccharine sweet voice as she walked through the shop to the door that would lead to the small office space. "I'm sure you don't have an objection, do you?" She kept going without waiting for an answer, opened the office door and went in. Tom gave Alex an exasperated "what can you do" look as he passed him. He mouthed the word "sorry" and followed Martha into the office. He closed the door behind him. Martha immediately spun on him. When she spoke, it was a hiss, and she didn't hesitate to let her feelings show on her face. "I suppose you've heard about the West party," she stated bluntly. Tom sighed and leaned back against the door, taking out his handkerchief and wiping some of the dust from his fingers. He noticed a small splinter and pulled it out, grateful it had gone into the skin of a callus so he couldn't feel it. "Of course I've heard about it," he replied, "and I'm sure you've heard that we have to go together." Martha scoffed, turning swiftly so she was sideways in front of him. Her face was as red as a beet. He couldn't see the sweet girl he'd once adored and wanted to marry. All he could see was a miserable woman who wanted to be free of his company. If they hadn't been forced together, they would have remained friends at least as they explored their options. "Why can't you just tell them you don't want to go?" Tom asked, his frustration with her coming out in his voice. He threw one hand up in the air as he spoke. "Why don't you be a man and tell him you don't want to go?" Tom scowled at her. "You question my masculinity?" My maturity. You're a spoiled little girl who doesn't dare tell her papa what she really wants in life. Don't talk to me about insecurity. And it's not about that for me anyway. Martha rolled her eyes. Tom had never thought he could be so close to even the thought of smacking a woman upside her head. Yes, she said scornfully. I know all about how much you love your pa, and how disappointed he'd be in you if you tried to back out of this contract. Well, I don't much care about how you feel or if you disappoint him. Your decisions are affecting my life. Before we know it, they'll get tired of waiting and set a date for us, and then we'll really be forced to marry. Then what? A life of misery. Martha's voice trembled, and Tom felt a momentary regret. He would have bet Martha wasn't really as awful as he thought. She was just stuck in a bad situation with no idea of a way out, other than hurting people that meant something special to them. It doesn't have to be a life of misery, Tom said, softening his tone and pushing off the door to walk up to her. I'm sure there's ways around this. We could find a way around it. Martha's eyebrows shot up and she stared hard at him. Are you saying what I think you're saying? Her volume went up and Tom frowned, looking over his shoulder at the door. Keep your voice down, he said. You don't want people to find out about this, do you? They'll tell my pa or your pa, and then we'll have a lot to explain. Martha huffed, crossing her arms in front of her chest and turning fully away from him, moving to the nearby window. She stood back far enough so that no one outside on the road could see her. I'm tired of this charade. I want it to stop. I don't want to be forced to live my life in misery. I'm real sorry you think it would be that bad being married to me, Tom said. Trust me, I feel the same way. You have to find a way to tell your pa you don't want go to the West party, she said. Tom was taken aback and stared hard at her. I beg your pardon? Martha frowned at him. I don't want you going to that party. I have some friends invited from Ricketts Hollow, and I want to meet up with them there. You being there will just be an unwelcome distraction, as I'm forced to stay on your arm the entire night. Tom felt resentment flood him, making him furious. I am sorry to tell you this, Martha, but I will be there at that party with bells on, with or without you on my arm. I want to go. I know it will be a good time because the Wests know how to put on a good party. I'm not going to miss it because you don't want me there. Martha let out an ugly noise of exasperation. Fine. I will see you there then. No need to pick me up. I already have a ride.
Chapter 4. When Anna was released from the chair in the beauty parlor, Emma decided to take her place and get a new hairdo as well. Amelia took the opportunity to grab her sister-in-law and inquire if she'd like to take a walk around town. Anna looked a little surprised, but agreed with a smile. That will be the best excuse for showing off my look. I won't look like this tomorrow, so I better let everyone see it now. Amelia laughed, enjoying the pleasant feeling she always had around Daniel's wife. You are a funny girl, Anna. I'm glad you came to Boone's Gulch and married Daniel. He's a lucky man. The two walked out into the dimming sunlight, as the sun made its way to the west to retire for the night. It would still be several hours before the street lamps would be lit, and the air had cooled off considerably, leaving a gentle warm breeze to run gently past their faces. I'm sure you'll find your own lucky man someday, Amelia. You're not worried about it, are you? How can I not be? Amelia asked. You are years younger than me, and you're married with a baby on the way. I should be in that position, too. Not that I begrudge you it. Just that I want my turn, too. Anna nodded and smiled at her, pushing her arms around Amelia's elbow and squeezing her. You're a sweet girl, Amelia. I would never think that of you. Amelia watched as Tom left the wagon behind, following Martha into the lumber shop. She wondered what business Martha had in the shop. Then she realized that they were going in to talk privately. Her stomach turned over, and she suddenly felt sick. Anna watched her, alarm on her face. Oh my. You suddenly look a bit green. Are you all right? Not going to vomit, are you? Amelia squeezed her eyes together and got herself under control. I'm fine. It's just a feeling that comes over me sometimes. Makes me feel very anxious. Because you saw Tom and Martha together? Amelia gave Anna a sharp look. What do you mean? Anna looked sympathetic, which caused Amelia to feel sick all over again. How had Anna figured it out? She couldn't remember the last time she'd mentioned Tom in conversation at all. Well, I just thought that since you obviously would like to get married before it's too late, and Tom and Martha are courting, you might feel a little extra anxious. Why would I feel anxious that Tom is marrying Martha instead of me? The words were out before Amelia could pull them back in. It was too late. Anna immediately caught on. A look of utter shock passed over her face before the look of realization settled there. Oh, I see. I thought it was because you are anxious to get married, and they are about to fulfill that dream. I didn't know it was because he? Well, I reckon that changes things a little bit. Amelia took a moment to think how amusing it was to hear Anna say reckon, when there wasn't a single person who said that in her hometown of Lerner, New York. It doesn't change things for me, Amelia said quickly. I've been harboring these feelings most of my life, and I'm handling them. The change I need is to go in the opposite direction, which is something I wanted to talk to you about. I'll be glad to be here for you, Anna replied, giving her full attention to her sister-in-law. Go ahead. I'm listening. I don't want to talk about my reason for doing this to anyone but you, Amelia said. Anna looked curious. For doing what? What are you doing? I think I'm going to answer an ad for a bride somewhere. Like you did. Anna's face turned to one of shock. Oh, Amelia, she breathed. That's a little extreme, don't you think? I mean, shedding feelings for a man can be hard, but living without your family can be much, much harder. Amelia shook her head. Nothing is harder than getting rid of these feelings, Anna. It's impossible. I talked to Helen about it earlier in the parlor. She's the one who brought up the idea and suggested I speak to you about it. I had no objections when Daniel put out that ad looking for you. We welcomed you. Maybe it will be like that for me. Anna snorted softly, giving her sister-in-law a skeptical look. Let me just say, I don't want to be around when you tell Daniel what you're planning. I don't think he will like it. Amelia frowned, her heart hurting at the thought of her brother's disapproval. I don't think he should object. It's the same way he found the love of his life. Anna smiled for only a moment before becoming serious again. Be that as it may, you're the one who will have to leave the fold, and I don't think Daniel will approve. He is perfectly content with the three of you staying spinsters and living in the family home for the rest of your lives. Amelia had to grin, amusement sliding through her as she remembered her earlier conversation with Helen. That's what Helen said too. Maybe I'll just tell the man to come here instead. Anna laughed. Not the way it's traditionally done, but if he's willing, I don't see why you couldn't try. Amelia felt a wave of adrenaline wash through her veins. She clapped her hands together delightedly, her grin widening. So you will help me then? Oh, thank you, Anna. Anna held up both hands. Wait a minute. I mean, of course I'm going to help you, but you have to really think about if this is what you want. There's the potential of getting hurt, you know. Even if you convince the man to come here, you may still end up not compatible in one way or another, and having to get your heart broken. Amelia shook her head. It's a chance I'm willing to take. Every day for years, ever since I was a kid, I had my eyes on Tom. Every day, I've had my heart broken all over again. I can't spend all the days of my future wishing things weren't the way they are. He loves Martha. He's going to marry her. He's been with her for years. I don't see that changing anytime soon. I have to move on before I waste away my life. That's incredibly wise, Amelia. In that case, I'll do whatever I can to help you. I think, though, that you should try to stick to ads from somewhere, Utah. That way you are in traveling distance of your family if you go there, and the same will be true for him. Amelia thought that was a good idea. She nodded. Yes, that sounds good. You will help me then? I'll do what I can for you. But you will need to tell Daniel what you're doing, sooner or later. The longer you wait to tell him, the more upset he'll be when he finds out. I mean, I don't think corresponding with someone secretly and then either leaving or this strange man showing up ready to marry you would do much for Daniel. I know it would make him angry, Amelia said regretfully, but I think it's something that needs to be timed exactly right. Telling him, I mean. And maybe you could do that for me too. Anna laughed, shaking her head. My dear, no. It's your job to tell him what decisions you're making. Or don't tell him. But I think you respect him enough to tell him. Just not yet, Amelia said. Let me at least look through some ads before I make up my mind if I really want to do it anyway. Anna nodded, giving her an approving look which made her feel warm inside. That's your prerogative, Amelia. It's just my advice that you don't wait too long. You know. I do, Amelia said, also nodding. I do. I don't want to upset Daniel. But I've been thinking about it a while, and the only way to make myself stop wanting a man who is spoken for is to find the one I'm supposed to be with. Yes. I completely agree.
Chapter 5. I don't want to be the one who isn't allowed at parties and dances, Thomas, Martha said in a resentful voice. Tom cringed. The only time she called him his given name was when she was really upset. It was like a dagger in his chest when she said his name like that. It made him angry, and he hated having to suppress his anger with her. Better to part and go their separate ways before they killed each other, right? Or did serious bodily harm. I'm not trading off and on with you at these events like some kind of child, he responded coldly. I'm going to the West party, and you can meet me there as planned. We'll take it from there. I don't think my father will be in attendance. Will your pa or your brother be there? Martha looked thoughtful, and for a split second, Tom found himself missing that innocent look she used to have on her face. They'd tutored each other in subjects one was good at, and the other wasn't for that year they were together in school. That was the look he saw on her face back then. And just like that, the look was gone, replaced by the sour one that was her only expression when they were alone together. Tom certainly didn't want to spend the rest of his life with someone who looked that way every time they were alone. They sure wouldn't be having any children very quickly in the marriage. I think Matthew will be there with his sweetheart, she said the last word with disdain. Tom wondered if Matthew's sweetheart Grace deserved to be spoken of that way. Coming from Martha, Tom doubted it. He wished she was like her young self still. He wished they could at least be friends. But Papa isn't coming, I know that. He and your pa are going to play cards with some other men. Tom suppressed a sigh. Everything Martha said felt like a shot at him, like all she wanted to do was hurt him. Don't you have somewhere you need to be? He asked, his voice like ice. She narrowed her eyes at him and placed both hands on her hips. She kicked one hip out to the side and glared at him. How dare you talk to me like that? Oh, I am just exasperated with you, Tom. I wish I were marrying a man who loves me. We're not married yet, you know, Tom said quickly. There's always time for you to tell your pa how much you hate me, and would rather die than marry me. Tom was stunned to see the look of anger slide from Martha's face. She appeared defeated, her shoulders slumped, and her eyes dropped to look at the ground. I don't hate you, she said in a drained voice. I really don't hate you at all. I wouldn't rather die than marry you. Those things just aren't true. Well, it sure feels like you hate me, Tom said, trying not to sound too emotional. If he wasn't careful, someone from the lumber mill might see him blubbering. Tom, a broad-chested, muscular lumberjack, crying on the shoulder of a friend. He could see the headline in the early morning Post. Well, I don't. Her aggression was back but seemed more controlled. No more than you hate me. And I don't believe for a moment you hate me, or want to bring harm to me. I just don't know what's going on anymore. I'm miserable all the time. I get excited when my friends talk about an event going on. Then I remember that I'll have to go with you. You're okay. There's nothing really wrong with you. I just don't have those feelings like I had as a kid. I know you don't. Neither of us do. We grew up. I don't like hurting your feelings the way I do. But I just can't control myself. I want to stand in front of my papa and stamp my feet and throw a tantrum, but I don't think that's the way to prove I'm an adult. The way Martha tossed a droplet of humor into the conversation caught Tom off guard, and he let out an abrupt laugh. No, I don't think that would do the trick. We have to find a way out of this agreement, Martha said, stressing her words. We have to. I like you. Maybe we can be friends. But I don't want to marry you. I will never want to marry you. Tom nodded. I feel the same. Think about it for a while and come back to me. The party isn't for almost 3 weeks, right? That should give us some time to think about how to make everyone happy in the situation we're in. All right. Martha looked out into space for a moment before focusing back on him. I'm sorry I snapped at you. I'm just short-tempered today for some reason. Tom shook his head. It's all right. Let's get out of this stuffy office and get you some fresh air. That will make you feel better. Martha gave him a genuine smile, one he hadn't seen in many months. He opened the door for her and she passed him, giving him a grateful look. She turned to face him, clutching her bag in both hands in front of her. We will talk again before the party then. Her voice was sweet and loving. Tom knew it was an act. Absolutely, my dear. Have a wonderful evening. I will do that, and you too. Think of me now, won't you? She grinned wide and blew him a flirtatious kiss, winking afterwards. He smiled at her, wondering if it looked to the customers and Alex, who were only pretending not to pay attention, like it was real between them. She spun around and walked to the door, calling to Alex and Daniel West, who were together at the front counter. Both men raised their hands in greeting. Howdy, fellas, Tom said once Martha was through the door and gone. He walked to Alex and Daniel. It always made him feel good to be in the presence of Daniel West. He was a gentleman, known for his generosity and kindness. He was also stinking rich and willing to take care of those in need. Tom had never needed him for anything, but he had many friends who had, and the West family was always there for moral and financial support. Daniel didn't shy away from physical work, either. Tom liked all of the Wests. They were a fine family that deserved to be respected. Plus, if he'd ever had the opportunity to court Amelia, he would have. The arrangement his father made had kept that from happening. And now Tom was fairly convinced Amelia wasn't interested in him. She didn't seem interested in any men. The thought of the beautiful woman wasting her life in spinsterhood dismayed Tom. He could imagine them married with little children running all around his feet, something he was expected to do with Martha. If only his pa Henry wasn't so dead set on him marrying his old friend's daughter. If only he was allowed to make his own decision about this incredibly important event in his life. It's good to see you, Dan, he said, shaking the man's hand. How have you been doing? I'm doing good. Very good, in fact. Anna's only got about 6 weeks left or something like that. I told her it was silly to have this big party before the baby comes, because she will be ultimately useless once the day came, but she just smacked me so I stopped talking. He shrugged, giving Tom a hard look. You know how it is. Gotta make her happy. But you know on that day, she's going to be too tired to do anything, and I'll end up hosting with the help of my sisters. Probably Amelia. The other two are too young and flighty. They need to go find themselves some men, eh? But Amelia doesn't. Tom asked. Of course she does, Daniel responded quickly. I just don't think she wants to. She's never talked to me about it, and I try to stay out of her business. If she came to me, I would discuss it with her. But it's up to her. Not me. I have the family I was seeking. The moment the last word was out of his mouth, the door swung open, and Tom's brother, Alfred, and his best friend, Jared Dawson, who wore a patch to cover his missing eye, came in the shop. They stopped right at the door, and Alfred lifted one hand, gesturing to Tom. "Hey. Sorry to interrupt, but we're here to help. We unloaded the rest of the wagon. You comin' back with us to the mill?" Tom nodded. "Yeah. Hold on a minute." He looked at Daniel and Alex. "Nice seeing you both. I hope you have a good evening." "You too, Tom," Alex replied, lifting his chin up once in a quick nod. "You worked hard today. Really earned your money. I'm gonna call up Bert and let him know. Maybe you'll get a raise." Tom smiled wide. "There's nothing wrong with that. Thanks, Alex." He reached across the counter to shake the man's hand. He re-shook Daniel's hand and left with his brother and best friend.
Chapter 6. Amelia left the main house behind the next morning after breakfast, fully intending on taking up the day doing some needed gardening in the greenhouse. It was her favorite place to be. She loved the different types of plants she was able to grow there, along with the year-round supply of spices, herbs, and some vegetables. She had her own potato garden that was constantly filled with them, making it one of the staples at the West dinner table. Planted all around the greenhouse were plants of all kinds, a variety of shrubs, flowers, and bushes that were almost a maze, going in a complete circle around the glass building. That was where Amelia was headed. To the outside shrubbery. It was getting a little unruly, and she wanted to cut back some of the plants, do a bit of trimming, her brother would call it. The men who worked the West estate didn't touch the greenhouse unless she asked them to do something. It was her pet project. She had wrapped her knees in lengths of soft cloth because she liked to put them directly down in the dirt instead of using her dress below her knees. It was rare that it was more than just dirt, but either way, the wraps made it more comfortable, as the cushion of fabric was enough to ease the stress on her knees. Once Amelia got within eyesight of the greenhouse, she lifted her skirt in both hands and started to run. Next time she thought she would use a horse to get there. She slowed down when she was near, and stopped in front of the entrance, leaning over with one hand against her chest and the other on her hip. Her heart was pounding like a drum, and she couldn't catch her breath. There wasn't a good reason for such an outburst of energy. It was just that when Amelia felt one, she liked to use it to its fullest extent. She began to circle the building, looking at the foliage, deciding what she wanted to remove and what she wanted to stay. She had designs running through her mind, and ideas popping up by the time she got back to the entrance. Satisfied, she opened the door and went in. Amelia swept her eyes over the rows of plants that stretched out in front of her. On both her left and right were tall trees, certain rare trees her father had picked up the seeds for in India one year. Daniel had discovered 2 of the trees produced seed pods that were used by the people of India to create a powerful sedative, one that completely knocked people out for up to 6 hours. The trick was, the seeds didn't stay active for long. One would have to poison another with the seeds within 24 hours of the seed being extracted from the pod. Amelia knew which trees produced those special seeds. They belonged mostly to Daniel, who not only kept them healthy and producing, but he had also brought the business into it, and started selling parts of the trees just before harvest time to the doctors and nurses. He made a stunning profit off them when he sold them to the East Coast. But when that happened, Daniel would have to travel all the way to New York, and he didn't like traveling that far and leaving his sisters behind. Amelia went to a small closet that jutted out from the wall to her left, and pulled open the door. From inside, she removed a small stool and a large fabric bag filled with her gardening supplies. She stepped back outside and moved around to start on the left side of the building and go around clockwise. She had just kicked off her shoes and lifted her skirt up above her knees to drop down into the dirt when movement in the corner of her eye caught her attention. Her gaze snapped in the direction of the movement. Chills ran over her when she saw it was Tom McAllister. None other than the man she would have given all her teeth for. And here she was standing in front of him, stunned and frozen with her skirts lifted up past her knees. Amelia hurriedly dropped her skirt, her cheeks burning. He seemed amused. She couldn't have been more humiliated. "I didn't see you there. How dare you sneak up on a lady like that?" She asked the question in the tone of voice, not of a woman upset by his surprise visit. Instead, she was teasing him. It came out so naturally, she was even surprised herself. She was pleased with the instant smile that came to his handsome face. "I sure didn't mean to sneak up on you. I'm sorry I startled you. I really didn't know you'd be out here tending to the greenhouse today." "Would you have come if you had known?" Amelia asked, raising her eyebrows. "Or do you like stalking other people's land when they aren't around?" This made Tom laugh. He took his hat from his head and approached her. "I'm happier when I stumble up on friends, to be very honest with you." Amelia tried to hide the fact that his words made the hair on her arms and the back of her neck stand up. They were at least friends then. That she felt sure she could surmise from his statement. "It's nice for friends to stumble up on me, if I'm equally honest," she responded, gazing up at his blue eyes, which contrasted so well against his long dark eyelashes it made them pop. "That's nice to hear." He paused, and during that moment of silence they just stared at each other. Amelia wondered what he was thinking that made his gaze on her so intense. What was he looking at? Was he comparing her to Martha? Amelia was tempted to tell him her suspicions of Martha. She shook off that urge, knowing it was not her place to question the woman's love for him, especially since they were the ones courting and she was just a friend. His relationship with his future wife was not her business, she told herself for the umpteenth time. "Well, do you want to help me out for a little bit? We can talk and you can help me pull some weeds. There are plenty to be had." She stepped back from him and spread her hands out, indicating a vast area in front of her. "I'd be glad to get my hands dirty. And if you don't want to do that, there are gloves in the closet inside. They're Daniel's. I'm sure they will fit you too. You both have large hands. Bigger than mine anyway." Tom caught her eye and said, "I certainly hope my hands are bigger than yours. You are a petite woman. I'm a hard-working man. Can you even hold a hammer?" "Oh." Amelia let out a gasp and slapped at him playfully. "How could you? Of course I can hold a hammer. I just choose to leave that work up to you men, that's all." "Well, lead on, my lady, and tell me what you want pulled out." For the next half hour, Amelia directed Tom in the process of pulling the weeds from the left side of the greenhouse. She watched him closely, jumping in a few times when he went to pull something that she wanted to keep. Amelia's heart beat hard in her chest the whole time they worked together. He seemed as calm as could be, smooth with a gentle, easy smile that lit up his whole face. She noticed how his eyes sparkled when he looked at her. He looked so genuine, so uniquely real. The morning they were spending together wasn't making it any easier on Amelia to accept that he was a taken man. She wanted to think about how compatible she was with him, how well they got along. She enjoyed the look in his eyes and wanted to bask in the glow of his gaze for as long as possible. She wondered if she was hiding her feelings well. By the time they got to the end of the building, he was easily spotting the weeds from the plants and flowers Amelia wanted to remain planted in the earth. She didn't have to do much guiding, so she went to another part and started extra weeding. "I'm real glad for the help with this, Tom," she said. "Do you have the day off today?" He looked over his shoulder, pushing himself to his feet and brushing his hands together to knock some of the dust off the gloves he'd retrieved. "I took it off, yes. Unloading those wagons by myself the other day busted my hump. I'm still tired from that job." "Well, you looked like you handled it with ease. You always make that work look effortless." Tom grinned and snorted softly. "And you make this look easy. This is not a pleasant job, if you ask me." Amelia felt bad. "I'm sorry. You didn't have to help. I didn't mean to force it on you." Tom threw back his head and laughed. "You didn't force it on me. I've enjoyed myself thoroughly, and that's the God's honest truth." A satisfied feeling swept over Amelia, making her feel warm. Why did this man have to be taken by a shallow woman with no feelings for him? And why couldn't she just tell him?
Chapter 7. Tom was incredibly pleased with himself for taking a walk through the West property. He was taking a chance, he knew, on coming up on one of the Wests. He didn't really care who he came up on, as they were all his friends. But if there was one he really wanted to stumble on, it was Amelia. And she was the very one he'd seen right off the bat. He'd been tickled pink when he saw her hiking up her skirt to kneel down in the dirt, and had to suppress a laugh when he saw the surprised look on her face. He felt scandalous, having seen her legs from the knees down. They were very shapely, he had to admit. The half hour he spent with her pulling weeds was wonderful. He would almost venture to say it was the best time he'd had in quite a long time. He liked the way she teased him and pretended to be offended by something, returning with a barb of her own. She was so different from Martha. Even when he'd gotten along with Martha and thought marrying her was what he wanted in life, Amelia made him feel completely different, as if he was alive, free, able to fly above the land and sea. No woman had ever made him feel like that before. Certainly not Martha, much to his dismay. He couldn't carry on the charade much longer, though. He would eventually have to tell his father there was no way he was going to marry his best friend's daughter. He would rather hang himself from a tree than spend the rest of his life trapped in a prison of his own making. He was a coward for not saying anything about it to his father. Wasn't that what Martha was implying all along anyway? His thoughts were turning negative, and Tom didn't want that. Not when he was spending quality time with a woman who really made him feel like the man he was, loved and accepted in every way, even with every flaw. It was doubtful Amelia really knew any of his flaws, though. He wondered how she would react if she knew them. His temper, which was quick to flare, but which he had learned to control. He tended to be very sarcastic when angry, which had led to many fights with a screaming Martha who wouldn't settle down and act like an adult whether he was being sarcastic with her or not. Tom was willing to bet he wouldn't be the same man if he were with Amelia. Things would be easy and smooth. That's what he expected anyway. It was something he would likely never find out. She was just his friend, she'd made that clear. He couldn't make a move on her anyway, not with her and everyone else knowing he was betrothed to Martha. "You are coming to our party in a few weeks, aren't you?" Amelia asked, stepping closer to him as she pulled off her gloves. Her face was so lovely. Tom wanted to brush his fingers over her smooth skin. He bet it was as soft as a baby's cheek. He resisted the urge. "Yes, I was planning to come. Would you be willing to share a dance with me?" Amelia looked stunned. I will be the hostess. I don't know if that will be acceptable. Besides, you are not coming alone, are you?" He didn't like the way he felt when she asked the question. He felt like Martha was standing right between them, glaring at him with angry eyes, her hands balled up and placed on her hips. It made him feel like a little boy again, and he resented that. "No, I won't be alone." "You're bringing Martha, right?" Tom felt a little sick to his stomach. "Yes, well, she is meeting me here. Or there. At your main house, I mean." She smiled at him, restoring his good feelings. "I knew what you meant. We shall see what happens and decide then." "Play it by ear?" he asked. She nodded, her pretty lips pulled up in a warm smile. "You will keep it in mind then?" "I will definitely do that." She said it with such confidence, Tom was sure she was telling the truth. He was comforted, knowing she would at least think about it. "I don't see why I can't share a dance with an old friend from school," he said. He wished he could take it back when he saw the look on her face. It was almost like he'd insulted her. He tried hard to think of what might have made her react that way. What had he said wrong? His heart sped up and he hurried to say, "Please just keep it in mind, Amelia. I would very much like to have a dance with you. I'm good at it, you know." He put one hand over his chest and the other one in the air and simulated a few dance steps around her. He began humming a tune as soon as he pulled a giggle out of her. She spun around slowly as he circled her. "The party isn't until the end of the month," she said through her laughter. I'm getting in my new dance moves now, well beforehand, Tom joked, reaching out and grabbing her by the hand. She cried out and then laughed as abruptly. What are you doing? She asked as she spun her gently in circles. As soon as his arm circled her waist and his hand joined hers held up in the air next to them, Tom felt more comfort and happiness than he'd gotten in any dance with Martha. Amelia laughed and danced along with him, though the only music was what he was providing with his humming. She recognized the song and began singing along with him until they were spinning around happily. Finally, Amelia spun away from him and continued to do a circle 3 more times before bending over to catch her breath, laughing at the same time. "Oh my," she exclaimed when she was able to breathe somewhat. "That was terribly fun. Thank you for coming by." "I agree with your assessment, milady," Tom replied, bending at the waist in a deep bow as if they were on a formal dance floor. "Magnificent dancing, almost as magnificent as the singing that went along with it." "I am not a good singer," Amelia said, still breathing hard. He laughed, standing up straight. "I know. I was talking about me." "Oh?" Amelia gasped, throwing her head back and laughing immediately afterward. He was happy to be making her feel so good. It pleased him to know that he could still make a female smile. He wouldn't let Martha ruin him for other women. It might not be Amelia he settled down with, but he wasn't going to give up just because Martha wasn't a good match. He was now used to her insults and degradations. She managed to be that way only when they were alone. Her facade when she was around everyone else was fantastic. But he knew the real Martha. And Martha was no Amelia. "I guess I should be going now," he said. He didn't want the morning to end. It had been so much fun. "I really enjoyed myself this morning, Amelia. I hope we can do this again sometime." Amelia gave him a look that saddened his heart. "I don't think we should, Tom," she said. "You are betrothed. It wouldn't look right. If my brother saw what we were doing." She shook her head. "It was so much fun. But we can't make it a regular thing. I'm sorry. It's just not right." Tom flushed. He knew she was right. He had just humiliated himself in front of the one woman he cared about. He'd made himself look like a man who couldn't be trusted. Anger at himself split through his chest, making him feel heated. "I'll see you in town then," he said. "And maybe we can still have that dance at the party, if you want to." She gave him a warm smile that sparked a bit of hope in his chest. "I'll think about it. I really will." He nodded, said nothing more and backed away, keeping his eyes on hers for longer than he probably should have. Surely she could tell how much he cared for her. She had every reason to reject him. She could have smacked him and told him to leave just for asking for a dance with her. But she was his friend. Nothing more. She was just a friend. Chapter 8. Tom's heart was heavy as he left the West property. His life wasn't going the way he wanted it to, and logic told him there was only one person who could change that. He made up his mind to go back home and talk with his brother about how to handle the situation. It wasn't as if Henry McAllister was holding a gun to his son's head and demanding he marry his best friend's daughter. But that's kind of how it felt to Tom. The feeling that he would let down everyone in his family and the Smith family, and practically everyone in both Boone's Gulch and Ricketts Hollow was strong. That was too many people to have made a promise to, and then take it back when the time came to follow through. 5 years was long enough. 6 years was even longer. Then they would pull into their 7th year of courting. How was it that he and Martha were the only ones who knew it wasn't ever going to happen? It was as though his father and Mr. Smith weren't even paying attention. That was a long time not to pay attention. He rehearsed in his mind what he wanted to say to his father, just like he had been for the past year. He wasn't in love with Martha. He barely even liked the girl. It wasn't her, it was him. His heart just wasn't in it. He didn't want to live his life in misery, married to the wrong woman. They were the same phrases, the same feelings and thoughts he'd had for so long he was saying them in his sleep. His anxiety was beginning to build, until he saw a woman in a one-horse buggy coming toward him. It was most likely one of the West sisters, since their property was the only one on this road for several miles. He stopped walking and waved back when the woman lifted her hand in greeting. When she was close enough, he could see it was Anna, if anything, by her large belly. None of the West sisters were fat by any means. Anna was looking plump and healthy. He wasn't going to tell her that, though. He knew better than that. He removed his hat and waited for her. "Good morning, Anna," he called out. She pulled the horse to a stop and smiled at him. "Well, hello there, Tom McAllister. What in heaven's name are you doing all the way out here?" "I was just taking a stroll through the woods. Daniel said it was okay." Anna laughed. "I wouldn't care either, my goodness, Tom. I was informed right away that the people here are welcome to roam the woods as long as they don't leave it in flames. How are you today? You, don't look very happy." Tom grunted. "It's that obvious, is it?" Anna tilted her head to the side and shrugged one shoulder. "I'm real good at reading people. How about I take you wherever you're headed and we can talk?" Tom lifted his eyebrows. "You got time for that?" She nodded, her eyes warm as she gazed at him. "Always have time for a friend. Climb in." Tom stepped up into the little buggy, and Anna turned around. "I'm going home, I guess," Tom said. "No work today at the lumber mill, so I figured I'd take a day off." "It's a nice day for that," Anna said. He could tell she was curious to know what he was thinking, but too polite to prod him about it. He gathered his thoughts before speaking. "I think I'm gonna move away," he said abruptly, saying the first thing that popped into his mind. Anna's eyes darted to his face, giving him a surprised look. "What? When? Why?" Tom let out a short laugh and said, "I don't know. I was just thinking out loud. I feel like I need to get away from here." He wanted to tell her the one woman he wanted didn't want him, and the woman he was supposed to be with was a complete wreck of a woman, not compatible with him at all. But he couldn't tell Anna without mentioning Amelia, and that would start a rumor about him that he didn't want. It wasn't that he didn't trust Anna to be secretive. He didn't want to put her in that situation. What sister wouldn't tell another sister a thing like that? Even in-laws would reveal when someone had a secret admirer. Women just couldn't help themselves sometimes. And some men too, Tom had noticed. "What about Martha?" Anna asked. "Wouldn't she want to stay here? I never thought of her as the traveling type." Tom snorted. "If she had a chance to go all over the world, she'd leave here in a heartbeat," he snarled unintentionally, and knew his tone wasn't that of a man in love with the woman he was talking about. He cleared his throat, feeling his cheeks get hot. "I'm sorry. I'm just not happy." "I can tell. I'm sorry about that. What's wrong, if you don't mind me asking?" Tom thought about it. How much could he reveal? It would be fine as long as he didn't mention Amelia, he decided. "I'm not happy with Martha. I mean, she's a lovely girl. I don't want to hurt her. But I'm not sure we should be together. Please don't tell anyone I'm feeling this way. I hope I can trust you to keep this a secret for me, while I figure out what to do. Why don't you break it off with Martha, if you don't want to be with her?" Anna was blunt. "Wouldn't that be the best thing for everyone? You shouldn't let her think you are in love with her when you aren't." Tom had to keep himself from snorting again. If there was one thing Martha knew for a fact, it was that he didn't want to be with her. And the feeling was mutual. "I have my reasons." Anna was quiet for a moment. "Is there someone else you want to be with?" The way she asked the question made him feel like she'd been reading his mind. His cheeks flamed again, making it almost impossible for him to deny it. "I am not courting two women. I'm not that kind of man." No, I wouldn't think you were," Anna responded quickly. "I was just thinking that if there was another woman, it would mean you need to make a decision before people start getting hurt." Tom thought about his father, the Smith, Alfred, and everyone else that would be disappointed, and maybe even angry at him if he broke it off with Martha. He couldn't bear the thought, much less make it actually happen. "I feel so stuck," he said. "Stuck in quicksand. Slowly sinking. No lifeline." "My goodness, that is very morbid." Anna sounded shocked. He looked at her. Her blonde hair waved out around her face from behind the bonnet, making a frame for her roundish face. She had such a kindness about her, it relaxed him somewhat. He gave her a soft smile. "I didn't mean for it to. I'm not about to die. I'm just exaggerating. Don't worry." "Well, thank goodness for that. Maybe you should talk to your brother like you're planning. I don't know that there's a whole lot of advice I could give you." They both laughed. "You have life experience though," Tom said, feeling suddenly lighter than he had just moments before. "I'm not even married yet." "I do hope your brother is able to help you, Tom. And maybe your pa can too. You men need to open up and ask for help more often." "Ask for help?" Tom put on a stern face. "Never. I'm supposed to know everything as soon as I become a man, isn't that right?" "I suppose," Anna replied with a shrug. "But who is to say when you're a man? Not the experiences you've had. It's something in here." She tapped her chest. "Isn't it?" Tom grinned. He was glad Anna had picked him up. Their conversation was somewhat haphazard and jumping from one thing to another, but it was enjoyable. He could see why Daniel had sent for her. "You answered an ad in the paper to come here, didn't you?" Anna looked taken aback by the question, but only for a moment. She blinked several times and said, "Oh. Yes. That's right." She turned her eyes to him. "Why? You're not thinking of placing an ad, are you?" "Oh, I don't know. It's a silly idea." "Probably not." "No, it wouldn't be a good idea to bring another woman into this, would it? I don't think Martha would appreciate that at all. I don't think anyone would." "Well, maybe I'll just break with the normal and go to wherever she is. I have plenty of money. I've been saving for years and years." He narrowed his eyes, looking straight ahead of them. "That comes from not wasting it on frivolous things." She looked like she'd had a thought but wasn't sharing it with him. "I know. It's all talk. I'll never leave this place." He sighed. "I'm sorry I unloaded this on you. It's not really your business or your worry. Forget I said anything." Anna gave him a smile. "I won't tell anyone, Tom. Go talk to your brother. See what he thinks." Tom nodded. "That's the plan."
Chapter 9. Amelia pulled on the pod, snapping it so the two sides popped open and she could extract the peas from inside. She had a huge basket on the floor to her right and another on her left. One was filled with pods, the other with peas and the casing they came in. On the other side of the kitchen, Daniel and Edna, the cook they hired for large dinners, were going over a list of things that would be needed, including the serving staff and how many plates would be needed. "I thought we would let them take it as they pleased," Daniel said. "Have a stack of plates on both sides of the table, with all the food offerings spread out on the table. They can get it themselves." Edna looked surprised. "That doesn't sound like a dinner party to me, Daniel. That sounds like a free-for-all." Daniel laughed good-naturedly. "Don't be silly, Edna. It will save me money in the long run, because even though I won't know an exact amount of food each person will have, I won't have to hire as many people to serve them. I think it will make people happier to decide for themselves how much of one thing they want as opposed to being given an exact amount of one thing whether they like it or not. People can always ask for more. But you see, this way they don't have to ask. They can just go get it. That puts the power in their hands. You know people like to feel powerful." Edna merely stared at him. Daniel grinned. "Don't worry about all that. Let's go over the recipes, so I'll know what to get at the supply store." For the next 20 minutes, Amelia listened to her brother and the cook go back and forth with the list, adding and removing until they had one they were both satisfied with. Daniel brought the list over to where Amelia was sitting against the wall, and stood in front of her, scanning it, as if he hadn't just helped build it in the first place. "And how are you doing this afternoon, sister dear? Any plans for the evening?" "No plans," Amelia replied, smiling up at him. "How about you?" "No. Anna is tired from her trip to town today. She's resting. I'm probably going to do some reading in the library. Do you want to go to town for supplies with me tomorrow? I really don't think Anna will be up for another trip." Amelia nodded. It would give her a chance to possibly see Tom. Thinking of him brought his earlier visit to her mind. "You know, I saw Tom out by the greenhouse today." Daniel turned and grabbed one of the table chairs. He dragged it over and sat down. "Is that so? What did he want?" Amelia snapped a few more pods as she spoke. "He was taking a walk like some do, you know. I thought it was strange that I saw him though. People walk through our woods all the time and I don't find out for weeks. That's because they know we don't care. They wouldn't do it if they thought they'd get in trouble. No, I mean to say the woods are so vast that it's rare people walking through it come up on each other. It was like he was coming out to the greenhouse." Daniel looked up from the list. "You don't think he was there for nefarious purposes, do you, Amelia? Tom's not a man like that. He wouldn't do anything to hurt your plants. He wouldn't steal anything either." Amelia shook her head emphatically. "No. I'm not saying that. I'm not suspicious of Tom. I just thought it was strange, that's all. Still, we had a good conversation. I thought so anyway." "The McAllister men are all good fellas," Daniel said, his eyes dropping back to the list. "I'm not surprised you enjoyed your conversation with him." "Which of them boys are you talking about, Amelia?" Edna asked, coming toward them as she rubbed her hands with a kitchen towel. "Alfie or Thomas?" "Tom," Amelia responded. "That poor boy," Edna said, shaking her head, looking despondent. "Not surprised he's out walking the woods. Got a lot to think about, in my opinion." "He does? Why's that?" "That woman he's courting." "Martha?" Edna shook her head again. "They aren't a loving couple, that's for sure. It's not my place to judge now, I realize that. And I ain't one for gossip. But I think that boy is gonna be plain miserable if he doesn't stop the wedding before it happens." "Those are some very strong words, Edna," Daniel said, staring at the cook. "How can you say things like that? After several years, and they are still together." "I don't think it's love keeping them together." "Well, neither of them are greedy with their money. She has her own and he has his own, isn't that right, Daniel?" Amelia wanted to defend Tom, but wasn't sure why. Hearing that he might be unhappy with Martha should make her happy, shouldn't it? Isn't that what she wanted? Amelia's heart squeezed at that thought. No, it wasn't what she wanted, and it didn't make her happy. She wanted Tom to be happy, whoever he was with. If it wasn't her, he at least deserved to be happy with the woman he'd chosen. There had to be a reason why he was still with Martha. Amelia had long decided it was because the two were comfortable with each other, and the idea that they were going to marry. They just weren't in a big hurry to get it done. They didn't even live in the same town. She didn't know how they'd made it so long. "That's right, Amelia," Daniel answered her. "They do have their own money. And whenever I see them together, they look happy." "I don't know where you're getting your information from, Edna." "Don't you scold me, young man," Edna replied in a motherly way. "I'll have you know I heard it from a very reliable source." Daniel's curious look changed abruptly to a knowing one. "Wait a minute, you've been talking to someone at the beauty parlor, haven't you?" "I haven't," Edna said hotly, snapping her towel lightly in his direction. "I overheard something about it when I was walking to work one day. Outside the barber shop." "That's your reliable source?" "When you hear men gossiping, it's best to listen," Edna replied. "I decided that long ago, and have found that gossip you hear from men is accurate nearly twice as often as women. Women are very vindictive." Amelia didn't know what to think of the information Edna had just given her. She refused to be happy that Tom was unhappy. It left no logical reason for him to still be with her. How long would it take for him to see what others were already seeing? Was he that blinded by love for her? How could that be if it was true that he wasn't in love with Martha, as Edna had said? Amelia sighed. She'd never been so confused in her life. There was only one thing she could do. She would find a man in one of the newspapers, and get him to Boone's Gulch in time for the party. Martha wouldn't be the only one with a man on her arm. If only it was Tom on hers. "So you want to go with me tomorrow or not?" Daniel asked, pushing himself to his feet. "I'm gonna check on Anna. See if she wants to add anything to this." "Yes, I'd like to go. Don't forget me." "What time?" "Probably around 10. I have some outside work to take care of, and then I'll want to bathe before heading to town." Amelia nodded, snapping a pod, making the pea fly out and land at her feet. Daniel reacted, as if she'd pulled out a gun and shot him. "Careful. You'll put someone's eye out." He straightened back up, laughing, as Amelia rolled her eyes. He strolled out the room, leaving behind a laughing cook and a loving sister. Chapter 10. The lantern light flickered next to her when her door was pushed open, as it was knocked on at the same time. Amelia looked up to see Anna poking her head around the door. "Hey there, honey," Anna said. "Mind if I come in and talk for a bit?" "Not at all," Amelia said, closing her book and setting it next to her on the bed. She patted the mattress next to her, pushing herself to a full sitting position. "Is everything okay?" "Yes, with me, everything is fine. I thought you might want to talk about what we found out today." Amelia raised her eyebrows questioningly. "Daniel told me earlier that Tom actually visited with you at the greenhouse." Amelia nodded. "Yes, he did. We had a good conversation." Anna sat on the edge of Amelia's bed, turning to face her and pulling one leg up. "Rumors are going around that he isn't very happy being betrothed to Martha." Amelia's heart began to pound. She put one hand up to her neck and concentrated on breathing normally. "I didn't start those rumors," she said, slightly defensive. Anna reached over and patted her hand. "I didn't say you did. I didn't even think you did. If anything, I'm spreading one myself. You weren't the only one who saw him today, Amelia. After Daniel told me, I thought about it, and he must have just been leaving you when he came up on me coming back from town. I was so tired when I got back yesterday, because I was almost home when I met him on the street. I offered to take him to his home." Amelia wasn't surprised by her sister-in-law's act of kindness. "Did he accept?" "Yes, he did." Anna spoke slowly and distinctly, not taking her eyes from Amelia's. "I told him he looked very unhappy, and asked him why. He started talking about Martha, not much mind you, and he didn't say anything particularly awful about her, he just, obviously isn't in love with her." "I've been hearing that from a lot of people," she responded quietly. "But until he isn't with her, there isn't anything I can say or do. I'm not going to tell a taken man I'm interested in him. No matter what anyone is saying right now. How would that look, if it wasn't true and I made myself look like a harlot and a fool? Running before the man says go. Even the rumors are true, and he left her and came to me, how would that make me look? I'd look like the one who broke them apart. I'd be the homewrecker. I can't let that be said about me. I just can't." Anna nodded. "I understand," she said gently. "But all this is making you miserable. What are you going to do? Are you still going to answer an ad in the paper?" Amelia nodded back. "Yes, I think that's what I'm going to do. Maybe answer one in the next week, write to him and invite him to the party. Tell him I'll pay his way, and that way we can get to know each other face to face. Like you and Daniel did. Though there was another reason for that rush, wasn't there?" Anna smiled. Anna and Daniel had rushed things, because if Daniel wasn't married by his birthday, the entire family would lose out on the fortune their parents and Uncle Clarence had bestowed on them. Daniel was really lucky to find you. I hope I find a man like that. Anna appeared discontent, but her smile remained nonetheless. You're still going to do that, then? I don't see why not. Anna sighed. Well, you do make valid points about Tom. It's just a shame that he doesn't do anything. He's only hurting himself by not speaking up. Doesn't he realize that? I don't know what's going through his mind, Amelia said, feeling a wash of affection for the man warm her skin. He's certainly not stupid. No, he's not, Anna agreed with her. He's very smart. There's got to be something going on we don't know about that's keeping them together. Maybe she's... Amelia dropped her eyes to Anna's large belly. Anna immediately shook her head. No, I doubt it. This hasn't been a question for only a couple months. If that was the reason, they would already have a child. Besides, they don't act like they've been intimate with each other. Amelia tilted her head to the side. What do you mean? It's just that I've noticed when people have been intimate, they look at each other different. It's a more intense look, I guess. When I see a married couple that don't look at each other that way, I have a feeling they have been neglecting those marital duties. Oh my, Amelia said, covering her mouth with one hand. These are things you think about? I don't know when I figured that out. I've always been interested in reading people, trying to understand what's going on with them just by looking at them. I'm still training myself, but I've gotten particularly good at it. And that's not all I notice about people's behavior. The intimate things, I mean. I can tell if someone is in pain, on the verge of tears, all kinds of things. Plus, I've been reading books on behavior. You know, there are some who compare humans to apes in their behavior, and there's actually people who study those animals? Amelia listened to Anna's short monologue with great interest, her eyes unwavering from her sister-in-law's face. Is that a fact? That's a fact, Anna confirmed confidently. Amelia smiled. So there are apes who don't break it off with someone they shouldn't be with, too. Both women laughed. I think that's very interesting, Amelia said. And I don't think she's pregnant either. I'm just trying to understand why a man as smart as Tom wouldn't do what he wants to do. Don't you think if it was what he really wanted, he'd do it? I'm not the one who grew up with him, Amelia, Anna replied. You're the one who should be telling me what kind of man he is. Of course, he won't be the same as he was when he was growing up with you. And you don't see him every day, not like you don't want to. Amelia snorted with amusement. Well, you are right, I did grow up with him. And I always saw him as a boy who stood up for himself and wouldn't let anyone push him around. But he would fight for himself if he needed to. He wasn't aggressive, he was just confident, you know? I do understand, yes. And now, as an adult, I would have thought it to be the same for what's going on. But there's something I'm missing. And I've overanalyzed this whole thing, when it has absolutely nothing to do with me. But it does have something to do with you, Anna stated firmly. Indirectly, of course. And they don't know either, but still. You need to find out what's going on, for your own sake. Amelia raised her eyebrows, giving Anna a questioning look. How am I supposed to do that? It really isn't any of my business. I know for a fact that if I asked Martha what was going on, first she'd have to figure out exactly who I am, and then she would tell me it was none of my business. And probably not in a nice way. I've seen her with serving girls and other servants. I'm glad she lives in Ricketts Hollow and not here, Anna said, leaning back a little and straightening her back to stretch it. I am as well, Amelia exclaimed. Anna turned her gaze to her sister-in-law and grinned. I wonder if Martha has friends in Ricketts Hollow that talk about this situation like we are right now. A tingle ran over Amelia's skin and she grinned slyly. I wouldn't be surprised. But only if there's a man that's pining for her love over there. Somebody wonderful, who's been trying to capture her attention for a long time, but was never able to really get there. Well, we can only hope, I guess, Anna said. Amelia was feeling a little better about the situation, and was glad Anna had come in to talk to her about it. She was still going to look through the ads. She wasn't going to wait like she had always done in the past. She would find a man in the ads and invite him to the party. It might be unconventional, but maybe he'd like that about her. She had to decide very soon when she was going to inform Daniel. She definitely wouldn't be saying anything to him until she had chosen someone. There was no need for all the fuss when she was going to do what she'd made up her mind to do, regardless of how he felt about it. He was her brother, not her keeper.
Chapter 11. Tom was grateful for the hard work. It had been 3 days since he had a load of lumber to deliver, and he was glad to get back into town. He almost always saw the Wests in town when he delivered the lumber. He kept his eyes on the passers-by, but didn't see them all morning long. He was on the second wagon when he spotted a woman heading toward him. Unfortunately, it was the wrong woman. Martha lifted one hand high in the air. "Yoo-ho, Tom. My darling." Tom's stomach knotted up as he jumped down from the wagon and went toward Martha. "Hello there," he said, unable to use a term of endearment. It was getting harder and hard to keep up the charade. When he looked in Martha's eyes, he saw nothing but malice or indifference, depending on her mood. It was the total opposite of how she actually felt, and he knew that. When they met, she lifted up on her toes and kissed his cheek. "I've been waiting to see you. Do you have a moment to talk?" "Always for you," he said. "But we can't use Alex's office again. Shall we go for a walk?" "That's not private enough," she said under her breath, maintaining a huge smile. He looked around before settling his eyes on a building just up the block. "The church? There are a couple small rooms in there, right?" Martha nodded. "Okay. Come on." He could tell it wasn't easy for her to keep acting out this farce either. He contemplated telling her he was simply going to leave. He was stunned she hadn't run off with anyone by now. She wasn't unattractive. She had some good qualities. Surely there was a man just as shallow as she was in Ricketts Hollow. Then they could see each other every single day, and he wouldn't have to worry about her at all. They entered the church through the front entrance and had to pass through a foyer area before the sanctuary on the other side of a wall. The two walked to their left, where some additional smaller rooms had been added for visiting guests and for people who wanted quiet time with the Lord. There was a table and 4 extremely comfortable cushioned chairs inside. None of them were occupied, so they had their pick. Tom propelled Martha into the first one on the left side of the hallway. "What's news?" Martha asked as soon as Tom pushed the door almost closed. He turned to her. "You look frantic. What's your news?" Martha pulled her eyebrows together. "Haven't you talked to your father?" "At all." She snorted in disgust when he shook his head. "Oh, for goodness' sake, you never will." "I talked to my brother," Tom said in his defense. He was about to say he was still planning what to say to his father when she went on. "Well, your brother isn't the one making the decisions, is he?" Martha sighed. "Never mind. It doesn't matter. I have news." "Well, go ahead, let's hear it." "My Aunt Joan in England has asked my father to let me come and stay with her for a year. I'm sure you know that's not something I'm going to pass up." Tom saw a light at the end of the tunnel. He hadn't heard such good tidings in an exceptionally long time. Suddenly the dark clouds above his head started to break up. "When are you supposed to leave?" "That's the problem," Martha said, popping Tom's balloon. "You know they're both going to tell you to come with me." Tom blanched. "That's not going to happen," he said bluntly. Martha shook her head, scrunching up her face. "Of course not. You think I want you tagging along, running around gazing at other women while I gaze at other men, and everyone thinks we're both so horrible for doing so. No. My auntie says she will send me a ticket for the boat to England, and I'm to take it. I don't care what my father says." "We have to tell them before then," Tom said. You can't just leave like that. Everyone will be upset with you. Martha froze for a second, gazing at him contemplatively. Well, I'll be Tom McAllister. You do care about me a little bit, don't you? Tom frowned. I never stopped caring about you, Martha. I just don't want to marry you. There's a difference. Martha sighed. I suppose there is. We aren't the same as we were 7 years ago. Or 15 years ago when we were just children in the schoolhouse. I don't want people thinking you ran out on me. That wouldn't be good for either of our reputations. Does your pa know about your aunt wanting you to go overseas? Martha sighed again, this time more heavily. She plopped down in one of the chairs and slumped down a bit, hiking up her skirt just an inch or so. She looked depleted. Lord, no. I wish he did. I wish my Auntie Joan would insist on it with a letter directly to him. But once he tells her that I'm betrothed and have no desire to leave for a year, that will be it. Either that, or he'll tell me to take you with me. And you know Henry. He'll agree with my pa. He always agrees with my pa. I know it, Tom said, taking a seat across from Martha. It's very frustrating for me. I've tried to explain things to him that he really doesn't know about, but if your pa has told him different, he tells me I'm wrong. Even when I know I'm right. Martha shook her head. Pa is the same way. That must be why they are such good friends. Well, I'm at the end of my patience with this whole thing. I want to be free. I feel like I'm chained down. Like I'm in prison. It's not that bad, is it? Tom laughed. You don't have any other man you're interested in, do you? He wasn't a little bit nervous asking the question. That meant something to him. That meant that while he might care about Martha, he didn't care for her. She was free to desire any other man she wanted, as far as he was concerned. And those weren't the feelings of a man in love who wanted to marry her. No, there's nobody. I mean, I've had a few encounters with strangers in Ricketts Hollow who don't know at first, and I do enjoy the flirting. But I have to be so careful who is around because if I flirt with a stranger and it gets back to my father, there will be you know what to pay. I'm not wanting anything to do with that. I understand. How about you? Martha sounded genuinely curious. She sat up and forward, gazing at him. He silently chewed the inside of his lower lip for a moment before saying, I'm not sure. Martha's face lit up, making Tom cheer up immediately. There is someone. Oh my oh my. No wonder you've been so sullen lately. Who is it? Tell me, tell me. He wanted to spill all his feelings, tell Martha right then and there how much he wanted to talk to Amelia, how often he talked about her. But he couldn't put a spotlight on the West girl. He didn't think Amelia would appreciate that very much. She's just a friend. And I don't want to bring her into this. What are you going to do about your father? What are you going to tell him? And when? Did you want me to be there? Are we supposed to go and get both our fathers and tell them together? What are we going to do? Martha pulled in a deep breath and let it out slowly through her nose. I wish I knew, she said. I wish I had all the answers. We'd be free of this situation if I did. I feel the same way, but knowing that isn't helping. How about you send a letter to your aunt and ask her advice? Have you told her about us? I haven't told her that it's serious. She knows that I have a regular man that I'm with. If she knows we're courting, she hasn't mentioned it. Maybe she senses there's a problem. I mean, even if we were married, you'd be able to go there for a year without any problems from me. Not that she'd know that. Anyway, maybe she thinks we're already married. Martha looked thoughtful and then nodded. I'll bet you're right. Well, do you think she'd be supportive if you talk to her about it before your pa gets a chance to? You can put your slant on the situation before he tells her something different than how it actually is. All right. All right, yes, I think that will work. I'll write a letter to her right away. They both stood up at the same time and met at the doorway. Tom leaned to grab the door and pull it open, when Martha stopped him with one hand on his chest just over his heart. He stopped and looked down at her. "I'm sorry we couldn't make it work, Tom. I do think you are a charming and handsome man. I hope you understand that this doesn't have anything to do with you." Tom nodded. "And you are a beautiful and kind woman, Martha. But we weren't meant to be. This wasn't in God's plan for us, I don't think." Martha's face relaxed into a gentle smile. "I do agree with that. We can be friends?" "Of course we can. Always." She lifted up on her toes again, and this time when he leaned to let her kiss his cheek, he closed his eyes and smiled, sure that happiness was in store for both of them. Separately.
Chapter 12. Anna could not believe her ears. As soon as she realized they were right at the door ready to come out, she scooted into the next room over and closed the door just enough so she wouldn't be seen from the other side. She had her back against the door, her eyes closed, and her heart was pounding while she listened to Tom and Martha leaving the conference room. She was in shock. There only to make arrangements for the christening of their child when the baby was born, Anna had found herself eavesdropping on a conversation that was supposed to be private. She could not be more embarrassed. She was ashamed of herself. She fought with the guilt she was feeling, knowing this was valuable information for Amelia. She shouldn't have stopped. She shouldn't have even gone down the hallway to see who was in the church. It wasn't her business. She hadn't expected to stumble upon something that caught her attention though. And she'd apparently gotten there at the beginning of their conversation, because they were bickering at first, and then had a lengthy discussion. It was completely obvious to her that the two were being forced together, and they did not want to marry by any means at all. She felt sorry for them. Their fathers must be incredibly influential to them both, for them to carry on the charade for 7 years, or however long it had been since they decided they didn't want to marry. She waited until she heard the door of the entrance close before she left the small room. Her heart was still beating hard, and her breath was coming and going rapidly. She left the hallway to the conference rooms, and rounded the wall that separated the sanctuary from the foyer. "Oh!" Anna pulled back, almost running into someone who was coming around the wall from the other side. He stepped back too with a grunt. "A narrow miss," he said, grinning at her. Anna recognized Jared immediately. There was no way to mistake him. "Hello, Jared," she said with a grin. "I see you're here to clean up, are you?" He was carrying a mop and a bucket, with towels sticking out from his waistband nearly all the way around. There were several spray bottles also hanging from leather loops around his belt. "How can you tell?" "You look like you're going to clean somewhere that is terribly dirty," Anna laughed. She glanced over her shoulder. The church never seemed dirty. "What are you doing here?" Jared took a step back and bowed to her, sweeping one arm under him while holding the other one outstretched to the side. "Thank you, ma'am. That you think my work is so good I don't have to come back a week later is a gem to my ears. I'll be honest with you, though. The only time there is ever a real mess here is when the children have their Bible studies or hold their little plays. I don't mind cleaning up those messes because they don't happen as often as maybe they should." Anna was trying to listen to everything he was saying, but her mind was going in a different direction. She was sure that Jared was Tom's best friend. Did he know about Tom's plight for freedom? That he and Martha weren't a couple by any stretch of the word, and that they were making plans to break it off as soon as possible. She found it hard to believe Tom would open up to her, but not to his best friend. When she realized he had stopped talking and was just staring at her amused, she blinked quickly and said, "I see." He laughed. "Did you hear anything I said?" I did, I'm sorry. I was just thinking about something. I might need your help. Would you be willing to help me with something if it involved 2 friends who needed interference in their lives?" Jared's eyebrows shot up. "That sounds like an interesting proposition. Whose lives are you planning to interfere with?" Anna laughed. "Several. Did you see Tom and Martha leaving the church?" "I did." stopped to talk to Tom for a minute. Martha couldn't stick around, so she went on. Think he had some important mission he was heading for too. Why? We gonna throw them a surprise wedding? That question told Anna Jared knew nothing about the secret between Tom and Martha. She shook her head. No. I doubt highly they would be amused by that. In fact, it's just the opposite. I'm going to share something with you that I probably shouldn't know and shouldn't be sharing. I'm not a gossip, and I don't like to spread rumors. But this is a matter of life or death. He looked shocked. Anna shook her head again. It's not a matter of life or death, really. Not physically. How can you not have a physical death? Don't be coy, Anna said through a soft chuckle. I mean, their lives are not going to be happy if they continue with this and actually get married. What do you mean? Jared didn't look as surprised as he should have. Anna could tell he knew something, if it was only guessing from his own observations. They don't want to get married. Jared stared at her. At all. He still said nothing, but he did slide his eyes away from her, leaning to rest the mop against the wall. He pulled in a deep breath and crossed his arms over his chest. I think you better tell me what's going on, Anna. You seem pretty confident. This doesn't have anything to do with you, does it? Anna gasped. No. I mean, there is no scandal involving me and Tom, if that's what you mean. They were in here, having a heated discussion in one of the conference rooms, and I overheard them. I may have stayed, listening a little longer than I should have, but I've had my suspicions lately, and they were just confirmed. I couldn't help but listen in. Tom has been having some doubts, Jared said thoughtfully. But he's never said he didn't want to marry her. He's always wanted to, as far as I know. He doesn't, Anna said bluntly. And she doesn't want to marry him. I thought they were going to slap each other at one point. But then they started talking, and she told him she wants to go overseas. But this is my point, Jared. This is how I want you to help me. We won't necessarily get involved in their affairs. This has to do with Amelia. Jared's eyes moved rapidly around the room. Oh, your sister-in-law. Daniel's sister. Anna nodded. She's been looking through matrimonial ads for women, and is planning to answer one. She'd only doing that because she thinks Tom isn't available. He even asked me about it the other day when I gave him a ride, which is quite a coincidence. I think we should get them together that way somehow. Maybe intercept the letters or something, to make sure they are going to each other. That sounds like a complicated scheme, Jared said, sliding his eyes to the side, a skeptical look on his face. And even if Tom was dead set against marrying Martha, he isn't going to put an ad in the paper before it's all resolved. I don't see that happening soon. They acted like they were going to tell their fathers right now. All right. Jared sounded confident. This is what we'll do. We give them 24 hours. If they haven't told their fathers by tomorrow this time, we'll get together and figure out a plan. I'll write a letter maybe, use a fake name, put it in the newspaper right here in Boone's Gulch. Maybe I could even talk to Stephen about making just one newspaper, and you can make sure it's delivered to Amelia. And point it out to her. Stress it. Excitement was growing in Anna's chest. Yes. Then she will write back, and I'll take the letter to the post office. Or we can tell the postmaster what we're doing, so he can help us with our matchmaking. Jared laughed. Tom is my best friend, Anna. What you've told me explains a lot about his behavior recently. I'm going to dig for more information about how he feels about Amelia. Ask some random questions, you know. I'm excited, Jared, Anna laughed. Almost as excited as I am about getting this baby out of me. That's pretty excited, I'm sure. All right, let's make these plans solid and then I'll meet you back here at this time tomorrow. Yes. Let's do that, she responded happily. Chapter 13. 2 days later, Amelia was sitting in the living room in a comfortable chair, a blanket draped over her legs and a book open in her lap. She was leaned to the side with her legs up on the wide chair, and was propping her head up with one hand. She looked up when Anna came in the room. "And how is our mother-to-be feeling this morning?" she asked. "Saw you came in late last night. You weren't even at dinner. Everything all right?" Anna nodded, coming over to sit near her in another chair. Amelia thought the woman was looking beautiful, glowing as many pregnant women did, and seemed excited about something. Whatever it was causing her to breathe quickly and heavily. "I'm feeling all right," she said. "I just had a dinner date with a friend last night, that's all." "Well, that's nice of you. I hope it went well." Anna leaned toward her, looking down at the book. "Are you reading that again? You must really like it." Amelia dropped her eyes to the copy of Little Women, much worn by the many times she'd read it. "Yes, I know everything that will happen and know what to expect, but I still like it very much." "There's nothing wrong with that. I brought you something else to read though, if you want. I stopped at the printing press earlier, and picked up a copy of the newspaper." She held the folded paper up in front of her. "Stephen is a very nice man, don't you think?" Amelia thought the question was odd, but answered it truthfully, an image of the portly paperman coming to her mind. "Yes, he is. Very generous and accommodating," Anna said with a short laugh. She handed the newspaper to Amelia. "I was looking at the bride wanted ads. Because you were talking about that, you know. And I found one that's close to home. Look." She lifted up out of the chair just enough to hand the paper to Amelia, who took it, curious. Anna lifted out of the chair again, to lean forward and point to the one she was talking about. "See?" "Sit down, Anna," Amelia said, laughing softly. "You are too big to keep standing up and sitting down like that." "I see it. It's Ricketts Hollow. This one right here." Amelia read the ad, trying to think of who it could be in Ricketts Hollow. She really didn't know anyone from that town other than Martha Smith. She wondered how complicated things could get if the man who placed this ad knew Martha, and Amelia ended up having to go to dinners with Tom and his bride all the time. She shivered at the thought. "I don't know," she said, doubt filling her mind. "That might be too close to home. I mean, what if this man knows Martha and I end up having to see her all the time? I don't think that will work." She was surprised by Anna's reaction. Her sister-in-law looked almost horrified. "Oh, I don't think you should worry about that. I mean, there are ways to avoid something like that happening. You should, at least give it a try, don't you think? It's almost like it's fate. You and this man are both looking for love, and you wouldn't have to leave the family behind, not really." Anna looked a little frantic. "I think it's a golden opportunity, and you should definitely take it. You said yourself, it doesn't look like Tom is going to be free to court you, right? You don't want to live your life a spinster either. So take this and run with it, Amelia. Please consider it." Amelia lifted her eyebrows. "You really want me to write to this man? Answer this ad?" Anna nodded. "I think it would be a great idea. I just have this feeling. I think this could be the answer to your prayers. I'll even help you write the letter." Although Amelia was surprised by Anna's insistence, she believed her sister-in-law had her heart in the right place. She had spoken about answering one of these ads. She stood up and crossed the room to a small side table with a drawer. She opened the drawer and took out a sheet of paper and the pen sitting next to it. Anna was by her side a moment later when she sat at the longer table, the sheet of paper in front of her. She stared at it for a moment, and then referred back to the paper. "Mr. Stone?" She tried to think of anyone in Ricketts Hollow she knew that was named Stone. She looked at Anna, who had pulled a chair up next to Amelia. "Do you know any families in Ricketts Hollow with that surname?" Anna blinked at her. "I don't know anyone in Ricketts Hollow except Martha Smith." "That's you as well, isn't it?" "Yes, that's right. I don't know anyone there. He could be a new arrival for all I know. His ad is very vague, don't you think? It's almost like it was written for me specifically. She picked up the paper and stared at it, reading it aloud, looking for a young lady to come to my hometown and be my wife. I work hard and would like a reason to come home. The right woman must be intelligent and bold, kind and compassionate, willing to have a large family. She looked at Anna again. I'm all those things. Anna grinned wide and nodded. Yes. I think so too. For some reason, Anna let out a delighted laugh. Amelia just shook her head, wondering how her sister-in-law could be more excited than she was. This was a big change she was about to make to her life. She moved her eyes back to the paper and set her hand down on it. Okay. So. He is Mr., she referred back to the paper. Stone. Stone, yes? Amelia thought for a moment before putting her pen to the paper. Dear Mr. Stone, I was intrigued by your advertisement in the newspaper. I am just one town away in Boone's Gulch. If you are not partial to a woman from the East Coast, I would be willing to meet with you after several letters of correspondence first. It would work well so that I would not be away from my... Amelia stopped writing when Anna loudly cleared her throat. Her eyes darted to her sister-in-law's face. Don't give away too much information about yourself, Anna said. Not right away. You want to keep an air of mystery about you, don't you think? Amelia brought her eyebrows together. She didn't have any idea. But Anna had come to be with Daniel in this exact same way, so she ought to know what she was talking about. Okay, if you think that's best. Especially since this Mr. Stone is so close by. He might come here and try to find you before you're ready. Well, that would show me what kind of man he is right away, wouldn't it? Anna pressed her lips together and cleared her throat before replying, perhaps. But it would start everyone talking. There could be rumors going around about you, and that's just too much stress. You don't want to deal with that. Best to keep it light at the beginning. It might draw him in even more. Amelia laughed, feeling a twinge of excitement in her normally peaceful chest. Could this be the start of something good? She was grateful to Anna for being so helpful. If only she could use the same tactics to get rid of her longing for Tom. If only he wasn't taken and on his way to marriage. Sometimes she wished she were a woman with loose morals. But the thought of attempting to win another woman's man just turned her stomach. It wasn't her. Best to distract herself with this young man, Mr. Stone, in Ricketts Hollow. At least, she wouldn't be extremely far from her family. She'd visit a lot more often than Martha Smith.
Chapter 14. I've got something to tell you, buddy. Jared got Tom's attention, coming up in the loft of the barn where Tom was raking through the hay, breaking it up into bits. He popped his head through the hole at the top of the ladder, and then ducked back down when Tom jabbed the hoe in his direction. Jared laughed and climbed all the way up. You might want to sit down for this. Tom purposefully looked around him at the hay scattered at his feet. There were 2 square bales against the wall, but he didn't like to sit on them. They weren't comfortable, and stuck him in parts he didn't want stuck. Nowhere to sit. Just go ahead and tell me. I've done something. Tom stared at his friend, wondering what Jared could have done that would make him approach him this way. He had to admit he was intrigued. Okay. He went to the ladder and began to descend. Let's go down here, and you can tell me what you've done that is so important you almost get jabbed in the head with a hoe for it. Jared followed him down, and then to the small table and chairs set near the front of the barn. The chair creaked when Tom sat down, and he looked down at it warily. I put an advertisement for a bride in the newspaper for you, Jared said quickly. Tom wasn't quite sure he heard what Jared said. He pulled his eyebrows together and cocked his head to the side. I beg your pardon? Did you say you put an ad in the paper for me? What are you talking about? I put an ad in the paper for you to find a bride. Tom's chest tightened with apprehension. What are you? What? He put one hand to his face and rubbed his chin. He ran that same hand through his hair. Oh Lord. What if my friends see it? What if my father sees it? I'm going to be in so much of a mess. How could you do something like that without telling me? I wanted it to be a surprise, Jared said, lifting both hands in a calm down motion. You don't have to worry. I didn't use your name. I used the name Stone. I really didn't think I'd be able to convince you to do it, so I did it for you. I know how intimidating your father can be to you. I'm not really in that position, am I? I'll be your liaison. I'll get the letters for you and bring them to you. Letters? Tom grimaced. When did you do this? Jared grinned wide. His one eye twinkled delightedly. A couple days ago. And guess what? You already have a response. A letter right here. Tom took the envelope Jared held out to him. He turned it over. The flap was loose. You already opened it. He raised one eyebrow, giving his friend a close look. You aren't fooling with me, are you? You wrote this letter, right? This is all a joke. Jared shook his head emphatically. No. It's not a joke. I did this for you. I think you'll really like this lady. She sounds really nice, and even better, she's from Ricketts Hollow. Tom gave his friend a surprised look. Really? That's close. This isn't a letter from Martha, is it? I might have to punch you in the face if it's a letter from Martha. Jared laughed, throwing his head back and sending the sound into the rafters above them. If it was a letter from Martha, I'd let you punch me in the face, fella. Go ahead. I want to see what you think. Tom pulled the folded paper from the envelope and opened it. He read through the short letter. The young lady gave her age as being in her mid-20s. She was part of a close-knit family and was anxious to have one of her own. He wondered if this young woman knew Martha Smith. If you're even thinking about mentioning Martha in your letters to this lady, Jared gave him an exaggerated frown. I might be the one punching you in the face. Tom chuckled. The more he thought about it, and the more he read of this letter, the more interested he was in the idea. Why in heaven's name would I even bring Martha up? This woman doesn't know my name. I don't want my fake name associated with Martha. Bad enough my real one is. Jared laughed. Good. And you are quick to believe I'm going to be writing back to this lady. Tom was teasing his friend. He could tell by the new and pleasant excitement building in his chest, he was being given a new chance to get out of the rut he was in. Martha wants to go to England. I'm just waiting for her to go. She hasn't told her father yet. It seems like no matter what I do or what route we take, we're going to end up making both towns talk like crazy. And what will happen when I stop seeing Martha and start seeing another woman in Ricketts Hollow? I'll look like a scoundrel. No, you won't. Everything will come out in the open eventually. You and Martha can't go on like this. I see the strain wearing on you both. I'm frankly really shocked your fathers don't see it. Don't see what they're doing to you. Martha will let everyone know none of this is your fault. I'm sure she will give her blessing to whomever you decide to love and marry. Tom looked down at the letter again, at the signature at the bottom. It was signed by the name Agatha Miller. Agatha Miller. I don't know who that is. Do you? No, I've never heard of anyone in Ricketts Hollow called that, Jared said, shaking his head. That doesn't mean anything, though. I don't know a lot of people there. You don't either. Tom brought the paper to his nose and sniffed. He could smell a light scent that seemed vaguely familiar. I think I will write back to her, he said. He was surprised by the delight he saw on his friend's face. Looks like you approve of that idea. Oh yes, I very much do, Jared replied, nodding. I have had enough of watching you mope around, your eyes constantly watching for Martha to come around the corner and ruin your day. Tom laughed. She doesn't ruin my day. She doesn't mean to, anyway. Being forced together, and with a life sentence of misery together over our heads, has made us unkind to each other on occasion. Now we don't want to spend any time together at all. We've started making up stories to tell other people, Well, she does anyway, about times we've spent together. I don't talk about her unless I'm asked. This will be good for you, Tom. You deserve to have a happy life. You're getting to be an old man. You need to get married soon before you lose your good looks. Tom jabbed his friend lightly in the shoulder, knocking Jared off his feet slightly. They both laughed. All right. I'll write to her. This Agatha sounds genuinely nice. Just the kind of woman I might really get along with. He lowered the letter and looked at Jared. What did you say in the advertisement anyway? Jared shrugged. Just that you're an incredibly wealthy man with the world to offer the right woman. Tom raised one eyebrow. You didn't. Jared shook his head. No, I really didn't. I said you were looking for a kind and compassionate woman, a woman who wants a family. Smart too. I am surprised you got an answer this quick. I didn't realize it was even going to be put in the Ricketts Hollow newspaper. I'll have to see if I can find someone with a copy, Tom said. He folded the envelope and the letter in half and shoved it in the back pocket of his overalls. He rubbed his hands with a towel and shoved that in the other pocket. He moved in the direction of the ladder, but Jared grabbed his arm. You want to go ahead and write that letter now? He asked, his eyes sparkling. I can take care of all this for you. I'll take the letter back into town with me. It's about lunchtime. Why don't you take off early and have lunch with me? I can help you write your letter to her. Tom looked up at the loft. He still had plenty of work to do, but it wasn't going anywhere. He thought about it a moment. The letter was practically burning a hole in his pocket. He knew he would be too distracted to really get a lot done. All right. I reckon I can do that. I'll just come back a little early to make sure I get this done before nightfall. It will be there tomorrow too, Tom. Come on. Let's go get that letter written so I can get it to the postmaster before he closes up shop. You could just take it directly to this Agatha, couldn't you? No. You should correspond with her a few times before you meet. It's the best way to know if you're suited to her or not. And you might get other letters from women you'd rather talk to. You think? Jared shrugged. I suppose it's possible. Tom didn't know if he would get another letter. He'd rather respond to than the one in his pocket. There was something about it that made him feel different. Warm.
Chapter 15. Amelia sat at the library, stretched out on the couch. She was eating grapes, reading her book, and listening with one ear to the conversation going on outside the door. It was her two sisters, laughing about something they'd seen earlier. They'd gone to see a play in Ricketts Hollow, being performed by a traveling troupe of actors. That particular troupe was notable because they put on wild performances filled with comedy and drama, producing laughter and tears easily. Amelia had wanted to go with them, but her head was hurting and she knew she wouldn't have a good time in the loud environment. Her sisters had returned and had stopped just outside the library door, likely unaware that's where Amelia was relaxing. Her head was feeling much better, so she laughed under her breath and smiled when Rose and Emma recalled a particularly funny moment in the play they'd seen. The voices outside stopped, and a moment later the library door swung all the way open and Rose poked her head in. Hey there. I didn't know you were in here. I'm sorry if we were loud. Amelia shook her head. No, it's okay. You can come in. My head feels better now. I've had a short nap. Wonderful. Oh, I wish you had been able to come. It was such fun. Wasn't it, Emma? The middle sister came in the library behind Rose. Her cheeks were a rosy pink, and her eyes were sparkling. It really was. I hope you get to come next time. I will, I'm sure. Sit down. Let's talk. Do you know where Daniel is? Emma said, dropping into a chair nearby. I want to talk to him about inviting some new people I met tonight to the party. I can't wait for it. It's going to be so much fun, finally opening the doors to people again. Daniel has kept us boxed in too long, I think. Don't you agree, Rose? Rose looked like she didn't want to get in that conversation. Oh, I don't know. I guess so. He was simply protecting us. He hasn't done anything wrong. Emma laughed. I didn't say he did. I just want the parties we used to have, you know? Before we lost Mama and Papa. We always had so much fun at those parties. Now that Daniel has Anna and is starting his family, he's ready to let us live again. Thank the Lord. Yes, that's true, Rose replied, nodding. She looked at Amelia. Are you excited about the party? Amelia gave them both a warm smile. Of course. Why wouldn't I be? She could think of several reasons why she wouldn't be. She just hadn't relayed this to her sisters. She didn't know what they would think of her if they knew she had her heart set on a man out of her reach. She didn't want to know. Knowing Tom would be there with Martha was a thorn in Amelia's side. She refused to even think about it. She felt a good deal of relief when, before her sister could answer her question, the door opened once more and Daniel came in, with Anna right behind him. Hello, sisters, he announced loudly. What a strange occurrence, all of us home at the same time. I don't think I've seen several of you for a couple weeks, have I? The sisters just laughed. Amelia was glad her head was feeling better. She swung her legs off the couch and sat up, smiling at Daniel. He came over to her and leaned down to kiss her cheek. How's my girl doing? Head feeling any better? Amelia nodded. Yes, it feels a lot better, thank you. Daniel grinned wide. Good to hear. Especially because these two are hardly ever quiet when they're together, are they? Rose gasped, mocking offense, and Emma stuck the tip of her tongue out at her brother, scrunching her nose. All right. Let's not start a war. Anna laughed at the siblings, shaking her head. I think I heard you talking about the party. That's right, Emma said, nodding, turning her eyes to her brother. She moved across the room, holding her purse out in front of her. When she reached her brother, she had a piece of paper in her hand with several names written on it. This is a list of some friends I made tonight that I want to invite. Daniel looked surprised. I didn't know there were any new people in Gulch. Emma shrugged. I guess we just haven't been getting out and inviting anyone over for a while. I know I've been feeling a bit boxed in. She turned to Rose for validation. Haven't you felt the same way, Rose? Rose seemed like she hadn't been paying attention. She gave both of them a wide-eyed look as she tried to catch up with the conversation. What's that? Boxed in? Oh. Yes. It really has been a while since we've had guests over, Daniel. I guess we're all just a little excited, that's all. Daniel nodded, a look of understanding overtaking the surprise. Ah. Yes, I see. Well, I'm excited too. Amelia watched her siblings chat about the party, trying not to think about the fact that she was going to have a miserable time. There was no way around it. She was going to be unhappy from the moment Tom got there. And there'd be no one to tell about it. She could probably complain to Anna. But she didn't want to ruin her sister-in-law's night, either. It was supposed to be a fun night for everyone. What gave her the right to make anyone else miserable just because she was? She sighed heavily, catching herself in mid-breath. She let it out silently so her family wouldn't hear it. Her eyes were on Daniel, when suddenly there was someone beside her on the couch. She turned to see Anna had sat down and was giving her an excited look. Her smile was wide and her eyes were twinkling. Well, look at you, Amelia said. You look like you just got the one and only present you've ever wanted in your life. Oh no, Anna said with a soft laugh. You aren't the only one who's told me that, Amelia. It's because I'm pregnant, I'm told. That's why I'm just so excited all the time. She let out the laugh she'd been holding in. It's not that this time. She leaned in close to Amelia and cupped one hand next to her mouth, her eyes on the other family in the room. I have something to show you. Amelia blinked at Anna, knowing full well what it was Anna was talking about. She tried to deny the bubble of excitement in her chest, but she couldn't help feeling it growing bigger by the moment. "You got a letter," she whispered. Anna didn't answer out loud. She lifted her eyebrows and gave Amelia a look that couldn't be anything other than yes. Amelia's heartbeat sped up. Her stomach tightened a little as nervousness slid through her. She looked at her brother and sisters. She wasn't about to open the letter in front of them. "What does it say?" she asked without thinking. Anna laughed. "What makes you think I've opened it or read it? This is your letter. It's personal." She leaned closer and whispered, "I left it in the drawer in the table next to the front door. It's a few letters down. You can read it whenever you want to." Amelia looked at her siblings again. They were laughing about something they were planning for the party, a game they thought everyone would be highly entertained by. For a moment, she thought about getting the letter and reading it in front of them, tell them what she was planning. If the man wanted to meet after a few letters, it was very convenient that he was so close. It might soften the blow to her family. She wouldn't have to go far, would she? She licked her lips. "I'll read it later," she murmured. Anna nodded in acknowledgement. Amelia caught her sister-in-law's gaze and grabbed her wrist gently. "Thank you, Anna. I really appreciate what you're doing for me. I really do." Anna smiled at her. "You're a wonderful woman, Amelia. You deserve all the happiness in the world. And if I can help provide that, I'm sure going to try."
Chapter 16. Tom pulled the stack of lumber up and leaned it over onto the tailgate of the wagon. He pulled himself up into it and began to maneuver the wood to bring it up where he was. He was almost finished with the load of wood, and then only had to stack a couple bales of hay and some burlap sacks of various items in the wagon, and he was off to Ricketts Hollow. He hadn't seen Martha since their last confrontation, and he wasn't particularly anxious to run across her if he did when he got to the nearby town. "How you doing up there, Tom?" he heard. He looked over the edge of the wagon and saw the merchant, Angus Monroe, watching him load the wagon. "You going up to Ricketts Hollow?" "Yeah, that's where I'm headed," Tom said, continuing his work. "That's where I'm always headed," he grumbled as a follow-up. "You going to see that fine lady of yours while you're there?" Tom stopped working for only a moment, hearing a tone in the man's voice that made him suspicious. He rested his hands on his knees for a moment, hanging his head before standing up and placing his hands on his hips. "I might." "Why?" Angus grinned wide, showing a row of tobacco-stained teeth. He lifted a pipe to his lips and took a puff. White smoke filtered out of his mouth when he replied, "Oh, no reason. Just wonderin' how often you get a chance to go up there. Lots of stuff going on in Ricketts Hollow, I hear." Tom kept himself from sighing heavily. He hadn't heard of anything going on in Ricketts Hollow, but was sure it had something to do with Martha. She was probably flirting with every man under the sun. He knew she was getting tired of the charade. So was he. But until they made a final decision and talked to their fathers about it, she should be at least a little discreet. She could at least try. Oh yeah? He wasn't sure he wanted to hear any more, but figured it would delay his trip a little bit and maybe give him a heads up on what to expect when he got there. "What's going on that I don't know about?" Angus spit into the dust at his feet and shook his head. "Oh, if you haven't heard, I'm sure it's not my place to tell you." "I think it's a little late for that attitude, Angus. Why don't you just tell me so we don't have to go back and forth on this all day?" Angus gave him a snide look, which made Tom's temper begin to flare up in his chest. "You sure Martha is ready to marry you? She's been seen hanging around some fellas lately that, well, let's just say they ain't her friends." Tom kept in the heavy sigh he wanted to let out. "I think if Martha doesn't want to be with me, she'll certainly let me know. She's not the wallflower type, is she?" Angus laughed a choppy, abrupt laugh that Tom didn't care for. "Well, I reckon she is, isn't she? You just watch your back, buddy. You might not know what's going on. Best you find out before it's too late." Tom pulled his gloves from his hands as he jumped down from the back of the wagon. I thank you for your concern for my welfare, Angus. But I think I can handle it myself. Angus raised one eyebrow and took a step back. Just trying to be helpful. Tom snorted and lifted his chin in the air. Like I said. Thanks for the heads up. He went into the building and saw Jared coming around the corner, 2 large burlap sacks over each shoulder. There's just 4 bales of hay to go out there, Tom, he said as he approached. Tom nodded. Okay, thanks for helping out. I reckon I'm a little behind, but it happens, don't it? It sure does. The 2 men passed each other. Tom brought out 2 bales of hay, passing Jared once more. He waited outside for his friend to bring out the last 2 bales of hay, ignoring Angus, who was still standing in the same place. The man had finished his pipe, but didn't seem to have anywhere to go or anything more interesting to do than watch Tom and Jared load the wagon. An hour later, Tom was pulling into the town limits of Ricketts Hollow, his eyes set straight on the road ahead as he went to the mercantile where he was dropping off the burlap sacks. He didn't want to look around him because if what Angus was saying was true, he was going to see something that might make him mad. What Angus didn't realize was that Tom knew he wasn't going to see something that some man was doing to Martha. He was going to see Martha flirting with some man. That was what he expected. And when it happened, he knew exactly what he was going to do. He had to make a scene. At least a small one, pulling her away from whoever she was drooling over, and having a few stern words with her so that the men in town could see it. She would have to wait until she went to England to pull those kinds of stunts. She was bound to him right now, at least as far as everyone knew. He couldn't allow her to humiliate him when they were the only ones who knew how they really felt about each other. He wasn't all the way to the mercantile before he saw exactly what Angus was talking about. It was a bit subtle, as Martha was just walking down the side of the road, her arm wrapped around a man's, her face turned to him with a big smile as she talked. It was the expression on her face that gave her away. She had a flirtatious smile on her face, and the direct look she was giving the young man told Tom everything he needed to know. He wasn't surprised that he didn't get a good look at the man. He zeroed in on Martha. He wouldn't have been able to pick out that fellow from a group, by any means. He stopped the wagon and jumped down next to the group Martha was walking with. She stopped walking, making the man she was walking with halt in place and give her a wondering look. "Oh, hello, Tom," Martha said, trying to make her voice pleasant. He frowned, walking over to the nearest set of steps up to the sidewalk but not going up. "Mind if I talk to you for a moment, Martha?" he asked. Martha turned to her companion and gave him a dazzling smile. Tom wondered if that was meant to annoy him. He was happy to tell her she hadn't succeeded. He was annoyed because she was humiliating him, not because she was flirting with someone else. He wasn't jealous. He just wouldn't accept being embarrassed by her behavior. "I'll be right back, Henry. Please feel free to wait for me here." Henry looked from her to Tom and back to her, removing her hand from his arm gently. "I think we shall talk again another time, Martha." He turned to Tom and lifted his hat up. "Mr. McAllister." Tom blinked at the man. "You have me at a disadvantage, sir," he said in a gruff voice. "I am Bertram Bonfort. Just a traveler passing through. I happen to know Martha's family, and she kindly offered to show me around town. I am charmed by your lady, sir. Thank you for the tour, Martha." Henry lifted his hat once again, this time to Martha, who was looking quite sullen by that point. "Take care of yourselves. Talk to you later." He turned to the other people in their group and gestured with his head. They all followed him as if they were his bodyguards. None of them looked twice at Tom. Martha stomped down the steps toward him, holding her skirt up in both hands. "Now look what you did," she hissed. "I was having a fine afternoon with him, and then you come along and spoil everything. I don't care. You can't go around town like that, looking like you are about to marry him instead of me. Even if what we have isn't real, you are humiliating me and making yourself look terrible. Don't you realize that? You have to maintain some decorum, you know." You're bringing shame on your family and embarrassing mine. Martha huffed, lifting her chin in the air. I have nothing wrong. There is nothing going on between me and Bertram. Tom looked around, his cheeks growing hot. Lower your voice, he demanded. What's wrong with you, Martha? You should be happy. You're going to England and spending a year there. Let's hope you find the man of your dreams, someone who can tame you. Tame me? Martha gave him a glaring look. I'm not an animal. Tom brought his eyebrows together. Sometimes I wonder, Martha. Now stop this behavior and act like a woman of class, like you should act, until we break this off officially and go our separate ways. The woman who had answered his ad came to mind. His heart did a small jump in his chest and he took in a sharp breath. Just allow us both some dignity, would you? Martha pressed her lips together but nodded. All right. I'm sorry.
Chapter 17. Anna couldn't get Amelia's plight off her mind. She stared out at the passing scenery as the buggy Daniel was driving rumbled down the uneven path. The letter Jared had given her to give Amelia was open when she got it. He told her how he'd convinced Tom to use the name Stone, and that he'd been surprisingly easy to convince to go along with the scheme. She couldn't tell whether Amelia was happy about what was going on or not. She'd looked so melancholy that day in the library when Anna had given her that last letter. That evening at dinner, though, she looked much happier. So far, Anna wasn't sure what was going to happen from it all. Her hopes, however, were high that the plan would work to get Tom and Amelia together. What's on your mind, sweetheart? Daniel asked, getting her attention. Anna had long since wanted to tell her husband what was going on with his sister. He was a smart man, and he cared a lot for all three of his sisters. It didn't feel right to keep anything from him, even though it was Amelia's story to tell. But was it really? I'm just thinking about things. Daniel snorted lightly and let out a soft laugh. Things? That's very vague, my dear. Are you hiding something from me? You're not planning some kind of surprise for me or something, are you? You know how I feel about things like that. Anna laughed. Yes, I do. You love them. Don't try to tell me you don't love surprises because I know you do. Sadly though, no, it's not a grand surprise for you that's on my mind. Daniel's eyes took on a slightly worried look. You aren't worried about the baby, are you? Is everything okay with it? Anna's heart squeezed with love for the man. No, it's not about the baby. Don't you worry. He or she is going to be fine. I am a healthy woman. I always have been. I think it will be an easy birth. Daniel shook his head. You say that now, but... Anna raised her eyebrows. When was the last time you watched a woman give birth? I've got plenty of friends who have kids, and they get me to sit with them while their wives have the baby. I hear what happens in that room. He shook his head. I might be the one fainting if I come in with you. I doubt the midwife will let you in. You'd just be in the way, anyhow. Well, thanks for that. Daniel laughed when Anna slapped him playfully on the arm. I'm joking with you, my dear. Or maybe I'm not. I don't want to be in there. I really don't. And that's fine, Anna said, feigning offense. You aren't needed. She crossed her arms over her ample bosom and pretended to sulk. Daniel's smile was big as he put one arm around her shoulders and gave her a squeeze. Unless you want me in there. In which case, I'm really looking forward to it. Anna laughed. It's been a lifelong dream for me to be in the room while the woman I love screams uncontrollably because a human being is being birthed from her body. Anna felt a bit of a chill run over her skin. Oh my. When you put it that way, it makes me not even want to be in the room. Daniel gave her a sober look. I'm afraid you can't get out of it. Anna shook her head, laughing in delight. Okay, we're not going to think about or talk about that right now. I still have another 6 weeks. I'm going to make it all the way through, and we're going to have our family. Daniel squeezed her again, before pulling his arm back. I'm looking forward to it, my love. I really am. Anna peered into the distance and saw an approaching buggy. Oh look. Here comes somebody. They must be coming from Ricketts Hollow. There are other towns past Ricketts Hollow, you know. That could be travelers. They were both quiet, watching the approaching wagon until they could see who was driving the horses. Oh, that's Tom, Daniel said loudly. Anna felt a bizarre twitch in her chest. She had just been thinking heavily about Tom and Amelia. And here he was. She took it as a sign that she needed to clue her husband in on what was going on, and grabbed his arm, startling him. What? Daniel. I want to tell you something that you really should know about Tom. Daniel gazed at her, a curious look in his eyes. Well, tell me. He's getting closer by the moment. He is not in love with Martha Smith. I think he and Amelia should be together. Daniel cocked his head and pulled it back slightly. Oh no. Don't tell me. You've concocted some kind of scheme to get them together. Yes, I have. Anna hurried to finish what she was saying. Now don't you look at me like that. Amelia has been pining for Tom for some time now. I didn't know that, Daniel said. It sounded to Anna like he was a little hurt by being left out of the loop on that information. I'm the only one who knows, I'm certain. Well, except for Jared. He's Tom's best friend, you know. Daniel nodded his head. He had an extremely interested look on his face. Anna felt a wash of affection for him when she gazed at his profile. He had a mischievous look on his face that she loved. It meant he was on board with her shenanigans, even though he hadn't heard what she'd been plotting with Jared. She gave him a quick briefing on their plan. You can't give away the fact that it's them two writing to each other, she said. Daniel glanced at her. I'll refrain from bringing it up. Are you sure Tom is interested in Amelia? I believe he is. And I know for a fact Amelia is attracted to Tom. They are both getting up there in years. They need to be married soon if they want to have a family. Sounds reminiscent of us, Daniel said. One more year, and I would have been a bona fide bachelor. Anna laughed, squeezing his arm. Well, you aren't. You're my husband, and you're going to be a father. Hello. Howdy. Yoo-hoo. Anna lifted one hand and waved to Tom, who was pulling on the reins to get his horses to stop. He had a big friendly smile on his face, which only reaffirmed to Anna that he was the right man for Amelia. Well, howdy to you, he replied, taking off his hat to her. Well, if it isn't Tom McAllister, Daniel said, sounding at a loss for what to say. Tom McAllister. Tom. Anna gave her husband a curious glance, wondering why he was acting so peculiar. He flushed and looked away from them both. Anna smiled at Tom. I'm so glad we caught you. Are you still planning to come to the party? It's coming up soon, isn't it? Tom nodded. Yeah, I'm planning to be there. Gotta? I mean, I'll be bringing Martha along, I'm sure. Unless she doesn't feel like coming. Anna noticed all the hesitation in his voice. She was sorely tempted to ask him if he'd ever followed through with the mail-order bride advertisement, since they had talked about it that day he was leaving the West Ranch. But she didn't. She knew she would blow her own cover, and he'd figure out that she knew too much. So she kept her thoughts to herself. I'm sure we'll have a wonderful time. And it's all right if she doesn't feel like coming. Please don't let that keep you from coming. I'm sure we can find some entertainment for you that will satisfy. She hoped her words didn't give anything away. She didn't see how they could, since he didn't even realize Amelia was attracted to him. He did seem to perk up a little at the thought of coming alone and being entertained by the West family. I will definitely come even if she doesn't want to, he said, smiling. I'm sure I can have a good time with or without her. Chapter 18. Amelia rode to town on her horse, anxious to get away from the ranch for a while. Anna was in town, she knew that. She had no idea where her sisters had taken off to. Daniel was working. She didn't like being in the house alone. It just reinforced how miserable she'd been making herself feel for so long. She enjoyed the spring air. It was the perfect season for her. Just a little bit of a chilly wind that forced her to wear a shawl, but other than that, she could enjoy the sunshine. She wondered if she would see Tom in town. She hadn't seen him for a while. She missed seeing him, even though they didn't really talk very often. The man in the letters had her intrigued. She was very much interested in meeting this Mr. Stone, but had yet to invite him to the party. If he wanted to meet her sooner, she would consider it. The party was in 2 days, so her time was running short. Amelia was astonished by how fast her letters were being delivered and how quickly she was getting responses. His being in Ricketts Hollow really made a difference. With Anna's help, the letters had been consistent and fast. She wasn't quite into the town limits when she saw Anna's distinct form and the familiar horse riding in her direction. She smiled and waved. Anna did the same, and the young women stopped next to each other. "Guess what I have," Anna said with a smile. Amelia felt excitement rise up in her chest, making it tight with nervousness. "You have another letter?" "Yes, ma'am, right here." Anna reached in the leather bag she had slung over her shoulder and pulled the letter out. "I know how anxious you are to get this. So if you want to write back right away, you let me know." "What are you doing right now?" Amelia asked, taking the letter from her and gazing down at it with anxious eyes. Anna raised her eyebrows. "Nothing. I was in town and thought I'd come back and deliver this to you. Like I said, I know how anxious you've been. Well, come and have a picnic with me and we'll read it together. I brought some food. Enough for 2 if I don't make a pig of myself." The women laughed. Anna nodded. "I would love to come on a picnic with you. I have my water canteen here, so I have my own drink. I know you probably have your flask, don't you?" Amelia blinked at Anna as the other woman turned her horse around. Anna laughed. "I'm teasing," she said. "I know you don't bring your flask with you every time." "Oh, Anna." Amelia shook her head, laughing. "You are such a silly girl." An hour later, they were seated on a blanket in the middle of a patch of green grass just off the roadway. It was a beautiful area beside a stream on the outside of Boone's Gulch. Many people gathered there for picnics. There was no one there that day, and Amelia was happy about that. She had the paper unfolded in front of her and was scanning the words. She'd become comfortable with the man's manner of speaking. He was intelligent and well-spoken. He sounded gentle and kind. She hadn't gotten much information about his family life, really, which surprised her. But he told her his interests, his favorite books, and details about himself that made her appreciate him more with every letter. "He wants to meet," Amelia said. A strange look came to Anna's face. "He does? Does he say that specifically?" "Yes, he does. He is excited about it, according to this letter. I think it's time I did. I think it would be a good idea." "Wait a moment," Anna said, lifting one hand. "You should invite him to the party. That will give you a few more days to prepare. Don't you think that's the best place to meet him?" Amelia chewed on her bottom lip, thinking about it. "I don't know. I am so anxious. I would really like to meet him this afternoon if I could." Anna almost looked panicked. Amelia frowned. "Are you all right, Anna? You seem very invested in these letters from Mr. Stone." Anna rubbed one hand over her mouth and chin and then shook her head. "I guess. I'm just nervous for you, that's all. I know how much you've been waiting to find the right man. And I know why you've been waiting, too. It's because of Tom McAllister." Amelia's stomach immediately tied itself in a knot. The image of Tom went through her mind, and her heart ached for a second. "Why would you bring him up when I can't have him? That is very painful." Anna looked regretful. "I'm sorry, Amelia. I didn't mean to make you feel bad. I just was wondering if you still had any feelings for Tom." If you are still attracted to him, you should wait to meet this man until the party. Well, I have to write back to him to invite him to the party. I don't know if he'll get the letter in time. Then you should write to him immediately, Anna urged. It would be the day of the party, by the time he gets the letter. Maybe you could take it to Ricketts Hollow for me, Amelia said and then shook her head. Oh, of course not. I'm not going to send you all the way out there. She had a sudden thought that made her laugh, even though it caused her a little pain as well. I just had a thought. I could give the letter to Tom, and have him take it there with his next shipment. Anna looked horrified, which made Amelia laugh harder. Oh, Anna, if you could only see your face. You don't think that's a good idea? Anna managed a grin, shaking her head. No. I don't think you should give this letter to the man you've been pining for, and ask him to deliver it to another man. Amelia thought about it for a moment. What difference did it really make, though? He wouldn't know who the letter was for, or why it was being sent. The only reason not to do that was because he might know this Mr. Stone, and that would make Amelia feel horrible inside. To know the man she might marry was being given a letter by the man she wanted to marry, it just didn't sit right with her. Please give the letter to me, Anna said, her eyes directly on Amelia. Don't give it to Tom to deliver for you. Amelia shook her head. I'm not going to, she reassured her sister-in-law. She was still anxious to get the letter written, though. She almost wished she hadn't packed for a picnic, or had at least packed something to write on and with. You seem nervous, Anna said, leaning forward, undoing the cap of her canteen and tipping it back in her mouth. Are you all right? She asked after swallowing while she recapped the container. I was just wishing I'd brought the necessary tools to write the letter now. You could help me say the right things. Anna grinned. You'll never guess what I have in my bag. Amelia smiled back. I bet I can guess. What are you doing with paper and pen in your bag? Anna shrugged, lifting up the flap from her leather bag and reaching in for the notepad and pen. She handed the items over to Amelia, who took them as a tingle ran up her arm. She was excited about meeting Mr. Stone. He sounded so nice. He said he'd been working in the area for an exceptionally long time, and was surprised he hadn't met her. She was just as surprised that she didn't know who he was. Then again, she had used a false name. There was no way he could really know who she was. It would be astounding if they met, and actually found that they knew each other. She held the notepad on her lap, and propped the pen over it, waiting for the proper words to come to her. Make sure you tell him the party is at the Wests, Anna instructed, watching as Amelia jotted down a greeting and a few introductory sentences. Amelia looked up at her with a soft grin. That's right, isn't it? I'm sure I would have put my house. That would have given away exactly who I am. Then again, he's going to find out when he gets there, right? Yes. That's exactly how it should happen. Amelia felt a wave of affection for her sister-in-law. I think you're more excited than I am, she said with a laugh. Anna nodded. I might be. I just might be.
Chapter 19. Jared hopped up on the porch and dropped himself in the chair on the other side of the porch table from where Tom was seated. Tom had been stretched out, his legs straight out in front of him, his back arched and his neck on the back of the chair so his face was pointed upwards. His hat had been covering his face. When he heard the sound of Jared stomping up to the porch, he lifted the hat from his face and tilted his head up to look and see who it was. Howdy, he said, resuming the position and placing the hat back on his head. Got something for ya, Jared said in a delighted voice. Tom felt a nervous twitch in his chest. He sat up straight and put his hat on the table between them. He held out his hand expectantly. Letter? He asked. Yes, sir, right here. Jared handed the envelope to him. Good. Been looking forward to getting this. I guess you heard what happened at Ricketts Hollow the other day, didn't you? Jared nodded. Yeah, I did. Sorry you had to deal with that. I don't know what she's thinking. If she's that determined to get this over with, you'd think she'd be telling her father what's going on instead of making both of us look foolish to both towns. Jared raised his eyebrows and gave his friend a direct look. Tom returned the exact same look. What's with the look? You could be telling your father too, you know. He waved one hand in the air, dismissively. Don't worry about that right now. It's not you or Martha that have the problem here, really. It's your pa. They both want what's best for you both, but they think they know what that is. It's a shame, really. You two would make good-looking children. But you and the next woman you choose to be with will have beautiful children too. I'm sure of it. Tom listened to his friend rambling and just stared at him, blinking. You seem to know a lot about my future children. You been to the future or something? Jared tilted his head to the side and leaned closer. You said you wasn't gonna mention my time machine. They both laughed and Jared waved his hand again. Read the letter. I want to know what she has to say. Tom opened the envelope and slid the letter out. He unfolded it and was filled with a warmth when he saw the familiar handwriting. He breathed in deep and read the words. She wants to meet. In 2 days. She said to make it convenient for me, we can meet in the gazebo in the town square. He looked over the paper at Jared with a slightly confused expression. Convenient for me. She's the one in Ricketts Hollow. Jared laughed. I'm sure that was just a mistake. Don't worry about that. It's real convenient that it's the day of the West party, ain't it? You can take her there. Won't that be quite a surprise for them? To see you with someone new. Worry made Tom's chest tight. I gotta do something about Martha before then, I guess. Everyone is expecting me to take Martha. To the party, I mean. Jared nodded, keeping his eyes directly on Tom. What are you gonna do? Tom thought about it for a moment. It really was about time he did something about it. But he didn't want the confrontation. His father wasn't going to be happy. Neither would Martha's father. Martha would probably be perturbed about it too, especially if he didn't tell her what was going on ahead of time. I reckon I've got at least 24 hours to decide what to do, he said with a grin. Yeah, I reckon you do. Jared sounded solemn. Tom turned his eyes to his friend, and then let them stray across the lawn in front of the house. I shouldn't wait that long, should I? He asked. Jared just looked at him. It's not for me to tell you what to do, Tom. I'm your friend, and I know everything that's been going on with you. I know how hard this has all been for you. How much you want out of it. How much you want to be with. Jared stopped and gave him a sympathetic look. I think you should tell your pa as soon as you can. Just get it over with. Like you said you want Martha to do. Tom felt a twinge of apprehension in his chest. Or was it dread? Either way, he couldn't have felt more uncomfortable than he did in that moment, just thinking about telling his father he was not in the least interested in marrying Martha Smith. I don't know what to say. You'll think of something to say. Tom pressed his lips together. I don't want to tell him. You have to tell him. Tom tried not to let the frustration he'd been feeling for so long build up and make him angry. The last person he was going to take it out on was Jared. They were best friends. Jared wouldn't do anything but encourage and support Tom, no matter what decisions he made. Though he would give his advice to try to prevent Tom from making the wrong decisions. You know, we had a dance in the forest. The memory swam through Tom's mind. He'd been trying not to think about it. The woman writing to him from Ricketts Hollow had distracted him. But they were talking about telling his father the truth, and for years he'd thought he would be telling his pa he was going to marry Amelia instead of Martha. What are you talking about? Jared asked curiously. A few weeks ago, I went walking on the West property. And I came up on Amelia. I was hoping I would, you know. And I did. And we had a nice talk. She has a nice laugh. We were talking about the party and about dancing. So we just had a quick spin right there in the grass. She was at their greenhouse. Pulling weeds. But I didn't care if she was a little dusty from her work. He spoke the words wistfully, not even realizing it. She would have been beautiful, either way. Tom came back to reality, and his eyes darted to Jared, who was staring at him. I didn't even know you were thinking about Amelia West, Jared said quietly, his voice smooth and calm. He had a look of subtle delight on his face. Tom wondered about that for a moment. I reckon I have to stop thinking about her, Tom said, a stab of regret giving him chest pain. He didn't want to stop thinking about her. He'd been thinking about her for such a long time. But her brother was even convinced she would be a spinster forever. She just didn't seem interested, he'd been told. By the people closest to Amelia. How could he take a chance and risk his heart when she had already rejected so many? Jared nodded. I guess I've been thinking a lot about this little lady right here too, Tom said, tossing the letter lightly onto the table between them. And I do want to meet her. I reckon it's too late to write back. Unless you take the letter straight to Ricketts Hollow. Jared raised his eyebrows. I could do that. But why don't you just go ahead and meet her where she said and see for yourself who you really want? I can't have Amelia, Tom said sullenly. She doesn't want to get married. To anyone. Jared pulled his eyebrows together. Why do you say that? Because that's what her brother said. Could have sworn you were there for that conversation. When he said she had always turned everyone down, and he was sure she'd never get married. Jared shook his head. I don't know. Don't remember. Well, that's what he said. He doesn't know how I've always really cared about her. I reckon I should have told him at some point, but how would it look for a man who is supposed to be courting a woman to tell the brother of another woman that he's pining for his sister? Jared laughed. That almost made sense. Tom grunted. It did make sense. And it would look awful. You've been waiting too long, my friend. You need to tell your pa what's going on. Go meet this woman in Ricketts Hollow and see if you can build a new life away from Martha and the misery she's always causing you. Tom knew his friend was right. If he couldn't have Amelia and didn't want Martha, his best option was to meet the woman in the gazebo the day after tomorrow at noon. It was 2 hours before the party at the Wests was to take place, which would be enough time for him to invite her if they got along well right away. It would be a shock to the Wests and everyone else in Boone's Gulch. But he didn't mind shocking the townspeople sometimes. This one was going to be a big one.
Chapter 20. Amelia felt a little sneaky. Directly after breakfast, she was planning to take a trip to Ricketts Hollow. All by herself. She hadn't informed Anna of her plan. She just wanted to see if she could find this Mr. Stone and take a look at him before they met the next day. What if he wasn't as young as he claimed? Maybe he was an old man, and that's why she'd never heard of him. He could be a hermit, living in a little shack on the outskirts of town with no property or income to speak of. The thought only made Anna laugh. She was sure the chances of that happening were slim to none. Despite Anna's firm advice, though, she couldn't shake her curiosity. There was something intriguing about the letters she was getting from this man. Something that gave her a feeling there was more to the story than she thought. The only way she knew how to get around that was to go to Ricketts Hollow herself and see if she could find the return address for the man. If she couldn't, she could at least ask around for anyone who might know who he was and where he could be found. The ride to Ricketts Hollow was easy. The road was less bumpy when one was riding horseback. The wheels tended to bump through the holes and rivets in the road in a violent way, where the horses always knew how to avoid those spots. If they didn't, they would surely break a leg, and no horse wanted that. Neither did their owners. Amelia thought about Mr. David Stone, and the way he'd spoken of Boone's Gulch in such familiar and friendly tones. He might as well have been from Boone's Gulch himself. She'd never asked if he was a native of Ricketts Hollow. For all she knew, he might have moved there when he was a child from Boone's Gulch. Her mind raced in the time it took her to get to the small town. The sun was almost directly overhead, and people had emerged from the buildings to take their lunches, going to the restaurant, or sitting outside their establishments in chairs, eating and chatting with their friends. She hoped she wouldn't see Martha, and consciously made the decision to turn and go in another direction if she saw the woman. She had done her best to stop thinking about Tom, even though the thought of letting go of what they could have had made her heart hurt like it was being squeezed by a vice. She referred to the letter, but the return address was vague. She knew there was no way she would be able to find the residence of Mr. Stone. She let her horse walk slowly down the street, staying out of the way in case she needed to be passed by wagons or other riders. Her eyes stared at the letter in her hand. She lifted the envelope and pushed the letter back into it after folding it. Her mind raced as she swept her eyes around the sidewalk on both sides of the street. She wouldn't recognize him. She had no idea what he looked like. A plan formed in her mind, and she urged her horse to go a little faster in the direction of the post office. The postmaster would be able to tell her who this man was and where he stayed. He might even have directions for her to find the place. She tried not to feel awkward going in the small building. It was a likelihood he would know who Martha Smith was. But there was no way he would know how Amelia felt about the man Martha was set to marry. No one knew who she was or why she was there. She lifted her chin and walked with feigned confidence to the clerk who stood behind the waist-high counter. "Afternoon, ma'am," the clerk, whose name tag read Alex, said with a bright smile on his face. "What can I do for you today?" "Hello," Amelia said, using her classiest tone of voice. "I have a letter here. I was wondering if you could take a look at it and tell me where I might find this man." The clerk pulled the glasses from the top of his balding head and settled them on his nose in front of his eyes. He still squinted when he took the envelope from her, as if he wasn't used to looking through the glasses. He relaxed his eyes and read what was written there. A confused look came to his face. "I'm sorry, miss. I don't recognize that address. It doesn't look complete, really." "That's what I thought too," Amelia said, nodding. She took the envelope from him and held it out so they could both look at the front. She pointed at the name. "What about this name? This man? Do you know where I might find him? David Stone?" Alex glanced at the envelope again, but his face did not register any recognition. He shook his head. "I'm sorry. I cannot help you. I don't know who this man is, or why the address has it as coming from here. It's never gone through this post office. Perhaps the postmaster or someone else who works here has handled it?" Amelia asked. "Very doubtful," Alex responded. "I work here most of the time. This would have come through in the last day or two, as Boone's Gulch is close enough for next day delivery." Amelia nodded. "That's what I thought truly," she said, sliding the envelope back into her bag. "The address closest to the one on the envelope is the barber shop," Alex continued. "And I don't think you'll find what you're looking for there." Amelia smiled and gave him a light chuckle. "No, I don't think so." "Well, thank you for your help." The clerk shook his head. "Don't think I did much to help you, miss. I'm sorry about that." "It's all right," she replied in a comforting tone. "I am after a mystery. I appreciate you trying. You take care of yourself, miss." "I will. Thank you. And you too." Amelia turned away from the man, feeling a tightness in her chest she wasn't used to. It was a mystery. There was no one at the address on the letter. The address wasn't even real. The name he'd used wasn't either, apparently. Her confusion was only matched by her interest in what was going on. It was so strange. The mysterious letters. Anna's strange behavior. It took Amelia several hours to get home, and when she reached the house, she was just as confused as she was when she first set out. She immediately went through the house looking for her sister-in-law. Anna was in the living room, sitting back on the couch with her legs stretched out in front of her. Emma and Rose were also in the room, doing needlework and reading, respectively. Amelia stared at Anna, getting her attention. Anna must have realized something was amiss, because she put aside the book she had in her lap and pushed the blanket off her legs. "You all right?" she asked, getting to her feet. Amelia nodded. "I need to talk to you. It's about the thing that we discussed yesterday." "Let's go for a walk and talk then," Anna said. Neither woman spoke until they were outside, going down the porch steps to the lawn. "I went to Ricketts Hollow today," Amelia said bluntly. She glanced at Anna, who had a look of horror on her face. "Oh? And what did you do there?" "I went looking for the man who was writing the letters." "Mr. Stone?" Anna nodded. "Yes, clearly that's why you went. But what did you do? Did you find him?" Amelia shook her head. "No. It's a mystery, Anna. There is no Mr. Stone known to the postmaster. And the address is not real. The closest to this address is the barber shop." Anna's eyebrows shot up. "Really? That is very strange indeed. So how have I been picking up these letters then?" What are you going to do?" "I'm going to meet him at the party tomorrow, I think," Amelia said. "I will meet him tomorrow, one way or another. So I'm not going to concern myself with it too much." Anna's face relaxed. She looked pleased to hear her words. Amelia was curious how Anna had been receiving the letters and bringing them to her. She thought back, thinking she had never picked up any of the letters herself. Either way, she was set to meet Mr. David Stone at the gazebo in Ricketts Hollow tomorrow at noon. She was anxious and nervous. But she was also determined. She was going to find out what was going on with this man, no matter what. If she didn't like him as much as she thought she was going to, she would at least have someone to take to the party with her, so that seeing Tom and Martha wouldn't bother her quite as much. She hoped.
Chapter 21. While Amelia was traipsing around Ricketts Hollow, Tom was coming to the decision that it was time to tell Martha he was meeting someone else and she wasn't going to the party with him. Eventually, he would be the one telling his pa what was going on. He was going to tell his father with or without Martha or Henry Smith there. He couldn't stand to fake another day of happiness with the way his life was going. He worked as hard as he could to get everything done so he could get off work early. He would go to Ricketts Hollow and find Martha, hopefully away from her home, and have it out with her. The supply store clerk, Alex, helped him unload the last shipment he had on the wagon. "You aren't going to need anything else for a while, are ya?" he asked, climbing up into the wagon, anxious to get home to wash up and head to Ricketts Hollow. Alex shook his head, leaning against the wagon with one hand on the passenger side rail. "Nah. We've got plenty of supply now. Don't know what you're going to do with yourself if you ain't dropping our supplies off." Tom scoffed lightheartedly. "I'm sure I can find something to do with my time. Don't worry about that. You look like you're in a hurry. You got big plans?" Tom raised his eyebrows. "I do, as a matter of fact. I'm heading out to Ricketts Hollow. Gotta have a talk with Martha." "Oh?" Alex gave him a look of surprise. "I'm sure that ain't none of my business." Tom felt a trace of irritation in his chest. The look on Alex's face made it obvious he'd heard the rumors about Martha's flirtations. The irritation only fueled his desire to go and end it with her right then and there. "Might not be. But it sure seems to be everyone's these days," Tom said, keeping his tone light, though his words came out sounding hard. "That's all right, though. Things are gonna change. You still going to the West party tomorrow?" Tom nodded. "Yeah, still planning on it. You?" Alex gave him a smile and a nod. "Yeah, no one misses their parties. They haven't had one for some time. I think Daniel was going through something, wasn't he?" Tom laughed, Anna's friendly face popping up in his mind. "Yeah. He was busy courting and marrying Anna. And now they're having a baby." "I like that couple," Alex said, approval in his voice and on his face. "They're good people." "They sure are. That whole family is." Alex lifted his hand in the air. "I'll let you get on with your business then. You take care of yourself now." "You too. See you at there tomorrow. Yep. Alex turned and went inside the shop, leaving Tom to pull the empty wagon away and turn the horses to go toward home. His brother, Alfred, was outside the stables, brushing down his horse, a bucket of water nearby. The ground under the large animal was soaked. He lifted the sponge he was using as a greeting to his brother when Tom pulled up to him. Howdy. Where you been? Just finished work, Tom responded, jumping down from the wagon. He went to the horses and began to unhitch the horses from the wagon. I'm thinking about going to Ricketts Hollow. Gonna talk to Martha. Oh. Tom could tell by the sound of his brother's voice that he knew something was about to happen. Yeah. Tom came around to the side where his brother was. He patted the horse there on the animal's large neck, thinking about what he was going to say to Martha. I think it's time to stop this farce. Alfred stood up straight, dropping the sponge he'd been holding into the bucket of water, but holding on to the brush that was in his other hand. He stared at Tom. You're gonna tell her it's over, aren't you? He said, his voice low like he was telling a secret. Tom nodded. I've got something else going on right now. Something else going on? You should be a parrot, Tom said with a grin. Don't tease. I'm just trying to figure out what you're going to tell Pa. Are you going after the West woman? Tom licked his lips. I thought about that. I really wanted to. But Jared found me something else to think about. What are you talking about? Alfred sounded wary. I know you think Jared can be a little unconventional. But he's the best friend I've got, and he's got something going on I think is good for me right now. I can't really get into it. I'm gonna go and have a talk with Martha anyway. I don't want to take her to the West party with me. I'll go alone if I have to, but I'm not taking Martha with me. That's gonna be a big blow to her, I'm sure. Tom shook his head. He wished he had kept his brother in the loop about his relationship with Martha. But they really hadn't told anyone. At least he hadn't. Only Jared. If he thought about it for a moment, it was completely plausible that Martha had told many people. It could be that the majority of people their age were laughing at him every day. He was still going along with it, doing his father's bidding, putting up with being humiliated. No more. He looked at Alfred. Listen, would you mind putting the horses away? I'm just gonna ride mine, no need to lug this thing all the way there. I can make better time without it anyway. Don't mind putting them away. I'll even saddle up your horse. But on one condition. Tom gave his brother a curious look. Alfred grinned. You gotta tell me exactly how Martha takes this. I'm sure you're gonna get a real entertaining reaction. I wish I could come with you just to see it. Tom was a little surprised. He hesitated before walking to the house. This doesn't come as a shock to you. I thought you'd never do it, frankly, Alfred said, his voice a bit higher than usual. You've been pining over the West woman and haven't shown a single bit of real love to Martha for years. Not that I've seen, anyway. And that's not an insult, brother. I haven't seen her giving you any loving attention either. Not too many people she can fool with that kissy-kissy thing she does when she sees you. It's so fake no one could make that believable. Tom was a little disheartened to hear he and Martha hadn't been hiding it as well as he would have liked. I can do that. He nodded and headed toward the house. Thanks. He threw the words over his shoulder. He heard his brother respond and continued to the porch. He took 2 steps at a time all the way up, reaching the top in 3 strides. He crossed the deck quickly and went into the house. He was back outside 20 minutes later, feeling refreshed from taking a quick sponge bath and brushing his hair and teeth. He was grateful to see his horse saddled up and ready, standing at the bottom of the porch steps. Alfred was sitting in one of the chairs, a small canister in his hand. It was filled with liquid, and he was sipping from it. He lifted it to Tom. Sit with me a minute before you go, unless you're in a real hurry. Tom did want to get it taken care of. But he also had time to spare for his brother. He took the canister and drank a few swallows of the liquor. It burned on the way down and made his stomach feel warm inside. He dropped into the chair nearest his brother and leaned forward, propping himself up on his knees with his elbows. He clasped his hands together in front of him. "Are you all right, Alfred?" "Yeah. I'm just thinking about Ma. Wishing she was here to see all this that's going on. She'd have some wise advice for us, don't you think?" Tom felt a pang of sorrow in his heart. He nodded, the faint image of his mother running through his mind. "Yeah, I'm sure everything would be different," he said. "Not really something we can dwell on, though. We can't change it." His brother sighed. "I want to get married too, Tom. I want to have a family. Here you are pursuing your dreams, and I'm still just sitting here working the ranch with Pa." Tom hadn't expected to hear those words from his brother. He kept himself from spilling the beans about what he was doing right then. He tried to remember if his brother knew about the ad Jared had placed in the paper. "You're going to find a woman someday too, brother," Tom said. He grunted before saying, "One way or another, if you want to get married, it will happen. But only if you go after it. You won't find a woman sitting here now, will you?" Alfred shifted so he was slumped down in the chair. "Nope. I reckon not." He turned the canister up again, took a drink, and then wiped his mouth with the back of his hand. He glanced at his brother. "Guess I'd have to stop doing stuff like that too, wouldn't I?" Tom laughed. "Maybe. Depends on the kind of woman you find." Chapter 22. Tom moved his eyes up and down the sidewalks in Ricketts Hollow, wondering if the woman who had written to him would know it was him and give herself away. He certainly had no way of knowing exactly who she was or where to find her. The letters he'd received from her only had the town name under hers. It was up to the postmaster to get the letters to her. He tried not to think about the meeting he had planned for the next day with the woman of the letters. Agatha Miller. He still had yet to think of any Millers living in Ricketts Hollow. But their brief correspondence had only made him more curious than ever. He was anxious to meet her. His eyes settled on the gazebo as he went past it. Tomorrow. Martha was usually at the restaurant or the beauty salon. If she wasn't in those places, she was at home. Or visiting other states or towns with her father. He hoped she hadn't gone out of town. Not with the West party being the next day. Anyone who was anyone would be there. He spotted her horse in front of the beauty parlor, and his heart sank. He didn't want to go there and ask her to come outside. Not in front of all those ladies. It always embarrassed him. He didn't know what she'd been saying to them. What if they all knew that Martha had no love for him, and it was all just play acting? He would be so ashamed. Tom's eyes swept to the other side of the street when music came to his ears. The saloon was hopping. There was a lively tune being played on a piano, and he could hear both men and women singing a song in chorus. They were actually quite good. It gave him a comfortable feeling, so he urged his horse to go toward the saloon. He stopped in front of the hitching rail, dismounted, and secured the reins to the rail. There weren't any steps to go in the saloon, so he walked straight into the building, pushing the swinging double doors open. It was darker inside, but not by much. There were gas lamps lit all around the room, shining off the happy faces of the customers inside. No one turned to look at him. Men were playing cards at the round tables, some were smoking, talking loudly, laughing outrageously. There were a few women all around the piano player, smiling and dancing with the men near them. Tom went straight to the bar, waving his hand in front of his face when he passed a cloud of cigar smoke. "What can I get for you, buddy?" "Just a beer will be fine, thanks," he responded, leaning on one arm and turning to the side to look behind him. "They all look like they're having a fine time." "Yeah, they do," the bartender responded. He poured a mug of beer and set it down in front of Tom, and they are. They do this every Thursday. Don't know why. I guess to celebrate the last day of the work week coming up. I think it makes more sense to be doing that on Friday, don't you? The bartender laughed. "Yeah, I reckon so. What you in town for? You live in Boone's Gulch, don't ya?" You're the delivery driver for the lumber mill. Tom was surprised he was recognized. He wondered quickly if the man knew about his courtship with Martha. Yeah, that's me. He held out his hand. The bartender shook it. Tom McAllister. Les Armstrong, the bartender said. You've been coming to town for a long time, but I swear this is the first time I've seen ya in here. I don't come in here often, that's true. Tom couldn't remember having come in the saloon before at all. I just thought I'd stop in and wait for a lady to come out of the beauty parlor. Lee let out a raucous laugh. You won't be waiting long for that. Ladies are coming and going from that place all through the day. Tom chuckled. One lady in particular, actually, he clarified. And who might that be? Lee asked. Tom was again taken aback by the fact that Lee didn't know about him and Martha. Everyone in Boone's Gulch knew about them. How come everyone in Ricketts Hollow didn't? I'm looking for a couple ladies, really, Tom said, making a sudden decision. Really? Lee had a slick smile on his face. Tom grinned. I think they might be friends. Martha Smith and Agatha Miller. Lee raised his eyebrows. I know of Martha, of course. Everyone knows her. Don't think I know an Agatha, though. Tom nodded. I didn't recognize her name either. I was thinking Martha might know her. She's a friend of a friend in Boone's Gulch. You know of the Wests, don't you? I sure do, Lee said, looking suddenly interested. They're having a luncheon tomorrow, a party, you know. Lee's eyes twinkled. I heard about it. I gotta run this place or I'd be there. Won't be surprised if it's dead in here tomorrow. I was instructed to invite Agatha Miller to the party. So I'm looking for her. Thought Martha might know. Lee lifted his eyes and looked out over Tom's shoulder. You might want to do that now then. Looks like her standing out in front of the building now. Tom spun around and narrowed his eyes, focusing his vision over the swinging double doors that served as the entrance to the saloon. Lee was right. Martha was standing outside the beauty parlor with two other young ladies who looked about her age. Tom turned back long enough to slap a coin down on the counter and nod at the bartender. Thanks, Lee. Good day to ya. And to you, Mr. McAllister. Hope you find the woman you're looking for. Tom couldn't help thinking me too as he left the saloon. He looked both ways and hurried to cross. Martha saw him when he was halfway across the street and turned sideways as if to hide her face from him. He couldn't tell if she said something to the girls she was with, but neither of them turned to look at him. Martha, he called out, lifting one hand. Martha. The women she was with finally saw him and attempted to get Martha's attention. She was still acting like she didn't hear him. When her friends pointed out that he was trying to call to her, she acted as if she was just seeing and hearing him for the first time. Oh. Well, my stars. Tom McAllister. Whatever are you doing in Ricketts Hollow? The party isn't till tomorrow afternoon, isn't that right? I need to speak with you, Martha, if you don't mind. Well, go right ahead then. She gave him a dazzling smile. We'll let you two be alone, one of her companions said, taking a step back away from Martha. No, Martha barked, swiveling her head in her friend's direction. The young woman's eyes opened wide and she stared at Martha, who relaxed her stance. I'm sorry. I just meant, I'm sure this won't take long. Go ahead, Tom. What is it? Tom's temper had slowly risen during the scene that had just played in front of him. He took Martha by the arm a little more firmly than he normally would have. She opened her eyes wide and stared up at him. I need to speak with you alone. He looked at her friends and nodded slightly, lifting his hat from his head. Good day, ladies. He pulled on Martha's arm, separating her from her friends, guiding her down the steps to the dirt road and leading her back to where Tom's horse was waiting. He looked around before turning her forcefully to him. I'm finished, Martha, he said bluntly. She stared up at him. What are you talking about? Frustration filled his chest, making his heart pound. You know exactly what I'm talking about. I'm not doing this anymore. I'm not playing this game anymore. I want to be with someone else. You know that. I have more than one option in front of me now, and you aren't one of them. We need to end this now. Martha huffed, lifting her chin and looking very snobbish. Well, you haven't told your pa, and until you do. I'm going to, Tom cut her off. Tomorrow. Before the party. And you aren't going with me, by the way. Martha's jaw dropped and she looked at him, outraged. What do you mean? Why do you keep asking me obvious questions? Tom growled. His temper was getting the better of him, so he pulled it back and tried to think about the woman he would be meeting the next day. He was almost tempted to find out if Martha knew who she was, but he didn't want the woman taking out her irritation on Agatha. That simply wouldn't be fair. He hadn't mentioned Martha once to Agatha. Why should he? He didn't want Martha starting any trouble. Everyone expects us to go together, Martha said, getting louder. I'll thank you to be quieter, Tom said, forcing his voice to be gentle. She was just as frustrated as he was. Just because she'd been more careless with their reputations didn't mean he should hurt her. I've made my decision, Martha, he said softly. You need to tell your father tonight or tomorrow. I am telling mine and moving on with my life starting tomorrow. You need to as well. Chapter 23. Tom was up with the sun the next day. He hadn't really slept well, but it didn't matter. His heart beat with excitement the moment he woke up and became fully aware that the day was beginning. He was going to talk to his father at breakfast. Tell him what was going on. He would be open and honest, even about the woman in Ricketts Hollow. Maybe. Either way, he would be telling his father he wasn't marrying Martha Smith under any circumstances. He got dressed quickly and brushed his teeth and hair. He was ready and waiting in the dining room when his father came in and sat in his chair. They greeted each other as normal, but before Tom could get out what he was going to say, there was a knock on the front door. Alfred, who had just stepped off the last stair in the staircase, crossed the foyer and opened the front door. Howdy, Tom heard him say. Good morning. Jared's voice met Tom's ears. He pushed his chair back and excused himself from the table. His father just nodded. As soon as Tom stepped out from the dining room into the foyer, Jared saw him and began to approach. I need to talk to you if you got time, he said. He didn't look particularly worried, which made Tom even more curious. He jerked a thumb over his shoulder. You want some breakfast? We're just sitting down to eat. I was gonna have a talk with my pa. Jared nodded. Before you do that, can we just have a quick talk in the living room or the parlor? Yeah, that's fine. Come on. Tom gestured for Jared to follow him, and they went to the door of the living room. Tom passed through and stopped just on the other side. When Jared came through, he closed the door halfway, and they stood on the other side. What is it? He asked. Jared chewed on his bottom lip. I gotta tell you something, he said, looking reluctant. Tom felt a bit of nervousness pass through him, leaving him with a tight chest. You're making me uncomfortable. What is it? You know those letters I've been helping you with. The ones you've been writing to the woman in Ricketts Hollow. Tom raised his eyebrows. Of course I know. Agatha. I'm going to meet her at noon today. There's something you don't know about what's going on. She went to Ricketts Hollow looking for you. Tom was immediately confused. What? She went there looking for you, and now I think she might be suspicious. Tom shook his head. Suspicious? Because I used a different name. I mean, it shouldn't matter. Either way, why is she going to Ricketts Hollow when that's where she's from? Jared turned his eyes all around the room, settling them anywhere but on Tom's face. Pardon me, Jared, but you're really starting to worry me now. Is this woman even real? What have you done? Did a real woman write those letters? Jared nodded emphatically, comforting Tom somewhat. Oh yes, he exclaimed. A woman definitely wrote those letters. It's just that, well, it's not what you think. I'm going to meet this woman at noon, Tom said. And unless you can tell me why I shouldn't go, it's already a done deal. Jared chewed on his lip. I guess I just want you to be, well, I don't want you disappointed if she doesn't show up. Like I said, she's suspicious. Tom frowned. Jared, how do you know she is? Do you know the woman personally? The door swung open and Tom's father entered the room, staring at his son. What's going on here? Did I hear you say you are going to meet a woman? Tom's heart plummeted to his stomach painfully. He took a step back, as if to avoid the whole confrontation. But it was inevitable, and he braced himself. I'm going to meet a woman in Ricketts Hollow at noon, Pa, he said. And it's not Martha Smith. I've broken it off with Martha. I don't want to marry her. I don't want to spend the rest of my life being miserable married to her. She's a good woman, don't get me wrong. But I don't love her, and don't want to be her husband. He waited anxiously for his father to react. Would he lose his temper? Would he be incredibly disappointed? When he replied to the announcement, Tom nearly lost his balance. I have been wondering when you were going to tell me that. He blinked at his father. I beg your pardon, he asked incredulously. Jared was staring at the older man with the same astonished look. Mr. McAllister shook his head. I don't think you've loved her for several years, have you? Tom tried to recover his senses. He gazed at his father in wonderment. No. I haven't. How did you know? How long have you known? His father put one large hand on Tom's shoulder. I know you, son. I can tell by the look on your face. I notice when you start to turn away from your friends, too. Jared here is the only one you still rely on. When Martha fell out of your favor, it was easy for me to see it. Why didn't you ever say anything? Tom asked. He almost felt like he'd been cheated out of 3 years when he could have been free to pursue Amelia before she made a decision that she wanted to be single. I thought you needed to work it out on your own. Have you told Martha? I told her yesterday. I don't know if she'd told her father. Won't Henry be upset? He won't be angry with you, will he? His father looked thoughtful, crossing his large arms over his broad chest. He might be. I'm not really sure. We did have big plans to merge our companies and expand them both, so we'd eventually own both these towns. He tilted his head back and let out a laugh. I'm only teasing. I stopped working on the plans we originally had in place a few years ago when I started to doubt the marriage was going to take place. I don't know any other couple that was engaged for 5 years or more. Tom was almost in shock. If only he'd known. So you aren't upset with me for breaking it off? No. I want you to be happy, son. That's all I really want for you. I would hope you'd understand and know that by now. It's something I won't forget, Pa, Tom replied, holding his arms out. His father moved into them, and they gave each other a firm hug, patting each other on the back. Thanks for understanding. Do you have someone else in mind? This person you're going to meet. Where is she? How did you come about meeting her? She's a fine lady I met through one of those advertisements in the newspaper, Tom answered. He looked at Jared, who grinned. Jared set it up. He's been helping me correspond with her, and now we're going to meet. I'm going to take her to the West party tomorrow if she's willing, and we get along well. If not, I'll go alone. I'm not missing that party. I reckon you're pretty excited about meeting this woman today, Mr. McAllister said with a grin. You need a chaperone? Tom laughed, affection for his father filling his chest. No, Pa, but thanks. We're meeting in the middle of town square. I'm happy for you, son. I really hope this woman is the perfect woman for you. Can't wait to meet her. Jared, Tom, and his father went back to the dining room, ready to consume a hearty breakfast before a day of fun.
Chapter 24. Amelia's heart was practically coming out of her chest that morning. She couldn't wait to get to the gazebo and meet this mysterious David Stone. She hurried through her morning chores, getting ready for the party, and finishing up the last-minute details that were her responsibility. The house was abuzz with action as she went down the stairs. She was feeling the excitement, the adrenaline rushing through her body and making her feel slightly shaky. Rose, Emma, and Anna were rushing around, giving instructions to the servants they'd hired to come and help them with the party. There were a dozen more people working for them just for that one day. Most of them were happy just to be there again, whether they were serving the guests or not. Servants were always allowed to partake of the fine food and drink the West served. During the time they'd had that policy, they'd never once encountered a servant who took advantage of their generosity. So they never changed that rule. Amelia watched as two maids walked past her quickly, holding a decoration up between them and hurrying to another room with it. They were talking as quickly as they were moving. She avoided running into another young woman who was dressed like a scullery maid. She nodded at the young woman, who gave her a friendly smile. Finally, Amelia made it into the dining room, where a spread of breakfast food had been laid out. Daniel was the only one at the table, looking completely calm and collected. It was a vast difference from the hectic scene just outside the door. He looked up at her. "Good morning, Amelia. Did you sleep well?" "Good morning. Yes, I did sleep quite well, thank you." "You excited about the party today?" "I am. There might be a surprise guest or two, I'm thinking." The way he smiled made Amelia think Anna had revealed her secret. She gazed at him. He gestured to her chair. "Sit down. Eat something. You need to keep yourself nourished today. Never know what's going to happen." "What do you mean?" she asked innocently, pulling out her chair and sitting down. She immediately pushed herself up to a half-standing position, picking up her plate and doling out eggs, sliced bacon, ham, and several biscuits onto it. "I just think it's going to be a very exciting day for everyone." Amelia nodded. "I do hope so. We always used to have such fun at these parties, didn't we? I'm glad you decided it was time to start having them again. You were very distracted when you were writing to and courting Anna. Now you have the baby on the way. It's going to be a particularly good day for us all, I'm sure. The only thing I'm worried about is that Anna will have that baby right during the party." Daniel laughed. "Wouldn't that be something? I thought she still had a month to go." Daniel nodded. "She does, according to the doctor. But you never know." He leaned over toward her, pushing his newspaper to the side slightly. "I invited the midwife just in case." Amelia giggled before she began eating. Her heart thumped hard in her chest 2 hours later when she was preparing her horse for the ride to Ricketts Hollow. What would he look like? What kind of reception would she get from him? Would he really be happy to see her? Anna called to her from the porch. "Yoo-hoo." Amelia acknowledged her sister-in-law by lifting her chin once. "Are you going now?" "Yes," Amelia called back. "Is there anything left I need to do before I go?" "No," Anna spoke loudly. "We've got everything under control. You go on now and you have fun. We'll see you about 2 o'clock, right?" "Well, we may have to talk for a little bit too," Martha responded just as loudly. "But about 2 or 2:30. I'll bring him back here. If he wants to come." Anna grinned wide. "I'm quite sure he'll want to come. See you then." Amelia liked how confident Anna was that Mr. Stone would want to come to the party. It was a well-known event, that was true. He probably knew all about it, and was hoping she would ask him to come. If he knew anything about Boone's Gulch or the Wests, he would surely be glad to come. Amelia pulled herself up into the saddle, wishing it wasn't a 2-hour ride to Ricketts Hollow. She would grow more and more anxious as the minutes ticked by, the closer she got to the neighboring town. It was close to noon when she pulled into the town. Her heart was thumping so hard in her chest, she felt slightly faint. What would he think of her when he got to see her in person? Would she be as interested in him as he was in her? If he found himself genuinely interested at all? Her self-doubt was strong, by the time she got near the gazebo. But it was empty anyway. And there was still 15 minutes until he was due to arrive. Amelia was relieved to see an ice cream parlor on the side of the street near the gazebo, which was placed directly in the middle of the town square, in front of the town's 3-story municipal building. She rode her horse to the parlor and dismounted in front of it, throwing the reins over the hitching rail that ran along in front of the small building. "Well, howdy, young lady," the older man behind the counter smiled brightly at her as he spoke. "What can I do you fair? You want some ice cream, don't ya?" "I'd love a cup of ice cream," she responded. "I'm just here enjoying this nice day." The man went about making her a cup of ice cream. He set it in front of her and asked, "You going to the West party later today?" Amelia felt strange being asked that question. It was one she had never heard from anyone before, that was for sure. She smiled. "I plan to," she replied. "I'm waiting for a friend. We're supposed to meet in that gazebo over there." She pointed, as if there was more than one gazebo behind her. The man nodded. "Well now, how interesting. Don't think I've seen you here in Ricketts Hollow before. You just visiting?" "For today, yes. I'm sure I'll be back often. I live in Boone's Gulch." "Oh, that's where the Wests are," the man said as if just discovering an interesting new fact. "That must be why you're going. Gonna take a friend with you, huh?" "That's the plan, yes. You have a good time for me. I gotta keep this parlor up and running." He leaned over the counter closer to her and said in a low voice, "I'll tell you what though, if the town empties out because everyone is going to the West Ranch, I might just close up shop and go check it out myself." Amelia smiled wide. "I guess I might see you there then, huh?" "Yeah. I think you might. I'm of a mind, lots of people are going to that party." He looked up and over her shoulder. "I think your friend might be heading to the gazebo now." Amelia pulled in a sharp breath and forced herself to turn around. She had her eyes closed at first, but when she knew she was facing the gazebo, she opened them. She didn't see anyone in it. She swept her eyes to the area around it and spotted a man walking toward the round shelter. Tingles spread from her head down to her toes. Her heart nearly stopped. She slid off the stool and dropped her cup of ice cream on the ground. She didn't hear the man behind her exclaiming. She took a step out from under the roof of the sidewalk in front of the ice cream parlor, forcing the tears that came to her eyes back down. It was Tom. She pressed her lips together, shock running through her. She wanted to run to him, to cross the distance between them as quickly as possible, to throw her arms around him and ask how this could possibly have happened. But instead she walked as dignified as she could, grateful that she was coming up behind him once he got into the small shelter. He turned around in a circle, but didn't turn in her direction until she was standing right at one of the entrances. He blinked, staring at her. "Amelia?" he asked, a stunned expression on his face. She swallowed. "Tom. Are you Mr. Stone?" He blinked again, this time rapidly. I am. You're Agatha Miller." Amelia grinned wide. "I think someone has set us up." A look of delight came to Tom's face, sending Amelia's heart into overdrive. "I do believe we have been. And how do you feel about that?" "I've been wanting to talk to you for a long time, Tom," she responded. "Long before our dance near the greenhouse." "That was fun, wasn't it?" he asked. She nodded. "Yes. It was wonderful."
Chapter 25. If there was one thing Tom didn't expect, it was to see Amelia West, standing at the entrance to the gazebo, staring up at him with all her magnificent beauty. He wanted to grab her up into his arms and kiss her until neither of them could breathe. But he held himself back. He didn't want to scare her the minute he finally had her in his grasp. He held out a hand, and when she took it, he felt a tremor in his stomach. He led her to the bench chair that circled the inside of the gazebo. They sat next to each other. Tom tried to maintain his composure the best he knew how. He wanted to be a gentleman for her. He also wanted to find out how this happened. "I reckon Anna must have done this," he said, smiling. "What do you think?" "I think you're right. She's the one who showed me the ad in the paper. And she took all my letters to the post office and brought me yours back." "Did you really write those letters?" Tom nodded. "Yeah." "Why didn't you sign them with your name?" He raised his eyebrows, giving her an amused look. "Why didn't you sign yours with your real name?" "Because I'm A. West," Amelia responded immediately. "If I had, someone in Ricketts Hollow would have recognized me. Anna said it was better if I used a different name, so the person would correspond with me a little more. That way, she said, I would be able to tell if I really wanted to be with him or not." "That's exactly what Jared told me," Tom said, shaking his head slightly. He was grateful to his friend, especially since he had schemed to get the one woman Tom wanted to notice him. "Can I ask you something, though?" Amelia gave him a questioning look. "I thought you weren't interested in getting married. That was the impression I got when I talked to Daniel." Amelia frowned. "When did you talk to him about me?" "We weren't actually talking about you," Tom clarified quickly. "We were talking about things and you just came up. I think we were talking about how I'm not married. How there are several people our age that aren't." He said, "Well, he implied that you must not be interested in marriage because you turned down every man who asked you to see them socially." Amelia lowered her head, her cheeks coloring slightly in a way that made Tom's body grow warm. "I turned them down because they weren't you." Her words were music to Tom's ears. "I wanted to get married. I always did. But you were courting Martha. And what's happened with that, anyway? We are right in the middle of Ricketts Hollow. What if she sees us?" "I've already settled things with her," Tom said. "I told my father I won't be marrying her, and it's up to her to tell her own father that the marriage is off. We haven't been interested in each other for years. Our loyalty to our fathers is what kept us going along that way." Amelia shook her head and spoke in a sympathetic voice. "You must have been miserable. I'm sorry you had to go through all that." Tom grunted. "So am I. All this time it could have been." He looked at her and delighted when she blushed again. She dropped her eyes to her hands and he touched her chin with 2 fingers, making her look up at him. "It could have been us all along," he said softly. "Isn't that right?" Amelia bit her bottom lip. "Yes," she responded just as softly. "It could have been us. I guess we'll have to make up for lost time, won't we?" When Amelia gazed at him with open affection, Tom couldn't resist it any longer. He took her in his arms and pulled her into a warm hug. "You don't know how long I've been waiting to do this," he whispered. "I wish you had been able to do it sooner." He could feel her breath on his neck. "But now we can. I'm so happy." "I want to take you to the party," Tom said, pulling away so he could look in her eyes. "I've already told Martha, I told my father, now it's time to tell everyone what's happened. I think most people aren't going to be surprised. Apparently, Martha hasn't been very subtle about not wanting to follow through with this long-standing arrangement we had." Amelia gazed at him. "She hasn't been going around with other men, has she?" Tom didn't really know how to answer that question. Martha had only been acting out of frustration from their situation. "I don't blame her for anything," Tom said. "I'm not hurt by what she was doing. We weren't in love. She was just upset because she didn't feel like she had any freedom. And I suppose she didn't. She was being forced to do what her father wanted, just like I was. At least that's what we thought. My pa was very accepting of it. He wasn't surprised at all. Asked me what took so long." All while Tom talked, he studied Amelia's slender face. Her features fit so well together, her hazel eyes were so beautifully set in her face. Her lips were red and plump and just right for kissing. He couldn't wait until he was comfortable enough, and she was too, for him to experience that. "I want to take you back to Boone's Gulch," Tom said. "But I suppose you'll have to ride your own horse, won't you?" Amelia laughed, a tinkling sound that Tom liked very much. "I think riding alongside you would probably be more appropriate than taking the same horse at this juncture, Tom. No one even knows what's going on with us yet. Let's not shock too many people at once." Tom pretended to pout. "But it's so much fun to surprise people. Maybe when we get to Boone's Gulch we can act silly. But here, well." Amelia looked around at the people walking and standing outside talking. "These people all know Martha. They know she was supposed to marry you. It wouldn't be right for us to humiliate her, even if she wasn't very careful about how she acted when she was supposed to be with you." Tom was impressed with Amelia's sympathetic nature. He felt his affection for her growing by leaps and bounds. "You're right, of course." He looked around to see if anyone was watching them, but no one was. "Let's talk about how we're going to get our friends back for setting us up like this." Amelia laughed. "The only way I'll be getting them back is by buying them all the things their heart desires." Her eyes focused on him so directly, he felt them piercing into his soul. "I have wanted this to happen for years, Tom. And I never thought it would. I am so happy to finally get a chance to be with you. You're the only man I've wanted the attention from." Tom lifted his eyebrows, feeling a sense of awe. "Me?" Amelia nodded. "You. All along. And I was feeling the same way. I wish we hadn't waited so long." Amelia stood up and held out her hand to him. "We have a party to get to. My sisters and Anna are waiting anxiously for me to come back. I'm sure Anna is extremely excited." She let out a laugh. Tom released a contented sigh as he followed Amelia out of the gazebo. She had left her horse in front of the ice cream parlor, but he'd left his in front of the saloon. They met in the middle and smiled at the same time as they began the long ride back. Tom couldn't believe it had actually happened. It was Amelia, the one woman he'd always longed for. Jared had to be responsible in part, along with Anna. It was Jared that had placed the ad in the first place, without Tom's knowledge. He was glad he had gone along with it when Jared told him about it, instead of getting upset or angry. There would be more dances in the forest near the greenhouse. There would be dances wherever they felt like dancing. Their first dance would be at the party, where everyone would see. He would spin her around and around, and when she got dizzy, he would hold her on her feet, tight against his chest, so he could feel her heartbeat.
Epilogue. The party was in full swing by the time Tom and Amelia got back. Amelia went up the steps first, smiling at the guests who were standing outside. The family had set up different games for people to play outside, so many weren't paying attention when the two of them rode up. Amelia went inside with Tom right behind her. She kept her eyes open for anyone who noticed they were together. It wasn't until Anna, Rose, and Emma came out of the living room, where more games had been set up, that Amelia and Tom got any attention. Anna held out both her hands to stop Rose, who was on one side, and Emma, who was on the other. She stared at Tom and Amelia, a slow smile creeping across her face. "It worked," she shrieked, making both the sisters jump and stare at her like she had lost her mind. Her grin stretched from ear to ear. She gave Emma and Rose a wide-eyed glance. "Look," she cried out. "It worked." She ran across the foyer and tackled Amelia, nearly knocking her over. Tom caught them both and set them up on their feet with ease. The two women hugged, both of them laughing. "What's going on here?" Rose asked, crossing the foyer and giving Tom a direct look. "Howdy, Tom. Did you bring Martha with you?" He shook his head and answered before Amelia could say anything. "No. I'm not with Martha anymore. I've given my heart to your sister here. I'm courting her." Amelia's heart raced when she heard those words. Anna was laughing in her ear and pulled back so she could talk excitedly to the other two sisters. Oh, it was such a task getting these two together. We really thought it would never happen. I am shocked that no one ever said anything before, though. But what about Martha? Emma asked, her voice concerned. She will be very hurt by all this, won't she? Don't you worry about her, Tom said. We both felt like this. Neither of us have wanted to marry the other for several years now. We just couldn't say anything. Our pa wanted us to marry, and we couldn't figure out a way out of it. He looked at Amelia, sending a warm rush of affection through her from head to toe, making her heart pound. Until now. Now we're going to be together. And happy. But what will Martha do? She's been promised to you for so long. What man will want her now? Amelia raised her eyebrows, giving her sister a look of surprise. Rose? My goodness, there's nothing wrong with Martha. Just because she and Tom didn't work out, doesn't mean she is damaged goods. I'm sure there will be a man who will love her just fine. It's just... She moved her eyes to Tom. Not going to be Tom. She is a beautiful woman, Emma said in agreement. I'm sure she will be fine. I'm glad to see you here with Amelia, Tom. I knew she admired you. She has for a long time. I didn't know it was like this though. I couldn't very well act on it before, could I? Amelia felt a tingle run through her when Tom moved closer to her and put his arm around her shoulders. She tilted her head to the side, resting it on his chest. Oh, you two make a darling couple, Rose cried out, lifting her hands and covering her smiling lips. Amelia felt her cheeks growing hot. Let's go to the ballroom. Emma turned away from them. The ranch didn't have an actual ballroom, but they had emptied out one of the larger rooms and were using it as one. Amelia and Tom followed the sisters down the hallway to the room where there were many couples in the middle of the room, dancing, laughing, singing along. Amelia felt a sense of happiness she truly had never felt before. Every time she looked at Tom, she was in awe that she was really with him. That he had been the one she'd been writing to all that time. She had Anna to thank for the happiness she felt. She planned to thank her sister-in-law every chance she got. She could foresee herself doing many chores for Anna just because. With a smile plastered to her face, Amelia felt herself whisked off onto the dance floor by the man that would someday be her husband. He twirled her around but kept her safely on her feet, never letting her trip or fall. She felt complete in his arms and never wanted him to let her go. The first dance with Tom was over too soon. Her head was spinning when the next song started. They danced another one, and the one following that one. When they finally came off the dance floor, Amelia was surprised to see Martha standing by one of the veranda doors. She was holding a glass and talking excitedly with a smile on her face to the man she was with. Amelia's surprise doubled when she saw who Martha was talking to. Isn't that Jared? She asked, knowing full well it was Jared Martha was talking to. Yeah, Tom replied, that's him. He's talking to Martha now? Tom laughed softly. I'm sure it isn't anything like that. Not a relationship. Martha is heading to England to spend a year, or maybe even more, with a relative. Jared isn't gonna want to leave, and Martha isn't going to want to stay. I'm sure he's just being nice, bringing her to the party when the man she was supposed to come with decided to back out and come with someone else. He gave her a wink and a half grin. That sure was nice of him. Tom pulled her next to him, his long arm around her shoulders. Yeah, he's a good fella like that. Him and Anna. What are you gonna do? Give them both a big kiss, she suggested. Tom let out another laugh and said, not before I kiss you first. They both laughed, and he leaned in to do just that.
I hope you've enjoyed this latest production. Don't forget to subscribe and to ring the bell to be notified of new releases.